Man, I'll tell you what. And we got a big one lined up for you today, by the way. Tom Crean, former Indiana coach, going to join us just about 5 minutes from now. Lot to unpack, talking about college basketball headed down the home stretch, the Indiana job. Crean's name is actually, I've seen people say, like, you know what, in hindsight now, just bring back Tom Crean. The best they've been in the last 20 years was under Tom Crean. But he's going to join us just about 5 minutes from right now. Pacers last night in Washington. I guess it depends whether you're a glass half empty or glass half full guy or gal. You could look at it and say, man, once again, they got down 15. They dug a big hole. Washington came in having only won 9 games, still sitting on 9 wins for the year. How do you get down that early? And yet, to come back the way that they did and the players that led them. Obi Toppin. Eddie, you remember, I don't know, it was maybe a week ago, we were all sitting here shooting the bull about the Pacers in the hallway, and Dion, our boss, said, Obi Toppin's the one guy that brings it every single night. He's like, because it was right before the trade deadline, and we were talking about players that could possibly be traded if they needed to free up some sort of salary cap space to re-sign Myles Turner. And I think we're also seeing right now just how important, again, Myles Turner is. And Dion was saying they can't deal Obi Toppin because he's the one guy, along with T.J. McConnell, that brings it every single night. And lo and behold, last night, that never rang more true. That was Toppin's probably finest performance as a Pacer, is it not?
Yeah, it was for sure his Pacers career high, 31 points last night, and he got him going in the third quarter when they really needed it because starters weren't doing much in terms of production. Siakam had, if not his worst night, one of his worst nights in a Pacers uniform, and Obi Toppin and Benedict Mathurin were able to step up and fill the void.
I thought, and here's the thing, it wasn't just the scoring of Obi Toppin, it was the efficiency of that scoring, if that makes sense, because of the fact that he, it wasn't like he was out there just, you get guys that'll get 31, and it's because of high-volume shots. He was, his ability to shoot from the outside, when he gets it, and you don't think of him as a three-point specialist per se, but when he's got it going, he can get kind of an in-his-zone guy, especially from the corners. And that's what they needed last night. And then late, of course, Benedict Mathurin really carried them, especially in the overtime. And Mathurin kind of has that get-out-of-my-way mentality, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's what they were missing last year. Against the Boston Celtics and in some of those games against the Knicks and the Bucks. Coming down the stretch, they didn't have that guy that could go out and create or get to the foul line and get to the rim. And that's what Mathurin displayed last night, Jake, especially in overtime. I think he had 6 or 8, but he was dominant down the stretch in the fourth quarter too.
The Pacers now head into the All-Star break. So no action until a week from tonight, correct?
That is accurate. The Memphis Grizzlies begin a 4-game homestand.
Zach Edey, Ja Morant, and the boys will be here, and the Memphis Grizzlies will get the second half of the season kicked off. Of course, there is one Pacer headed to the All-Star game. That would be Pascal Siakam that will represent Indiana in the All-Star game. But time, and most importantly, time for the Pacers to kind of get healthy again, notably Myles Turner, and I know that they've obviously dealt with injuries, and those guys are back, and Aaron Nesmith is still kind of getting into form, if you will. But the reality is that Myles Turner is such a critical piece for what they do. It just is. And you can see now, when we talked about the importance, and we talked plenty about it, of what he brings to the table for them, just trying to facilitate what it is and the style that they want to play. You see now the importance that he brings. And I think you've got that obviously now heading in beyond the All-Star break, because they had a little bit of extra time here, and that's why they decided to shelf him with this neck sprain to get him back. But college basketball also kind of heading into turn 4, if you will, before we get set for Selection Sunday and into March Madness. Joining us now to talk about that and more, a guy nobody better equipped to talk about college basketball than our next guest, who joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. He needs no introduction in the state of Indiana, but I will do it anyway. You see him, of course, covering college basketball on ESPN, and he is the former head basketball coach in Indiana. Tom Crean joining us. Coach, how are you?
I'm good, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. I want to get to this first off, and I was thinking about this on the way in. You know, when you look at where we are right now, and as I mentioned, kind of in turn 4, right? You're heading into the final home stretch of the season. From a coaching standpoint, are you still, for most coaches, figuring out new ways and different looks for your team? Or at what point in the season do you look at it and say, I need to know by this point exactly every look and how my team's going to be prepared for it and how many different ways that I can play? Is there anything left to learn about a team at this point from a coaching standpoint?
Oh, without a doubt. And there always has been, but it's much more now because your teams are so new. And you can think that you get to know them in the summer, and you can think that you get to know them early in the season. When you haven't been with people, it takes a long time for any type of synergy, connectivity, chemistry. That stuff is always ongoing. And I think because the games are so there's so many that are so close, right? And so many leagues are so close. You're always trying to find an edge. You're trying to find you've got your basics, right? You've got this is how we're going to play. This is our base defense. This is what we run. Excuse me. This is what we go to. But you've also got to be able to game plan. And you've got to be able to look at strengths and weaknesses of another team. You've got to be looking at something you can exploit or something that you can get. And frankly, Jake, I think in this day and age, more than ever, you've got to keep your players constantly engaged. And I had this conversation with a referee the other day. Like, I can't remember a time when the games, the players are so quiet in so many areas. There's so many things that it's not that they're not playing hard. It's not that they're not trying. They absolutely are. But they're quiet. And getting teams to communicate on the floor is so hard right now. And you're constantly, as a coach, searching for different ways to create that engagement with them.
So what do you attribute that in terms of players being less vocal or more quiet amongst one another than they were, say, 10 years ago?
Oh, I think it's just change. I think it's society. I think it's there's so much more nonverbal communication. There's so much more lack of communication. There's so much more isolation. There's so much more being by yourself. I mean, everything that everybody deals with in their daily life, it just comes out in a basketball game. And that's just 2.5 hours of your day. And you've got to fight that constantly. And I don't think it's any different than what the world is. And so you're always looking for different ways to create an edge, to create different energies, to get your team looking at different things. Like, I'll give guys this advice because we always try to do this in the sense of, okay, this is what we track. This is what's most important to us. This is what we hang our hat on. But every game should be giving you something different that your players can really attach themselves to. So it might be like a lot of times, okay, we're going to get 3 stops in a row. Some people call them turkeys or they call them kills or whatever they call them. Okay, well, now let's find something else inside of that, maybe on the offensive end, or let's find something else inside of that we can really isolate on. Like, we're going to have, how many times can we come down and not let the ball get in the paint in a row, right? I just think you got to get your guys joined at the hip, so to speak, constantly more right now. And if you're not a creative, innovative, communicative coach that's looking at those things, then you better be really, really, really good at what you do.
And when you get into the NCAA tournament, you obviously, Coach, the challenge there is, you got to turn around in 48 hours and you don't know which of the 2 teams you're going to be playing and whatever else, right? So you kind of got to be ready for everything. When you look at the teams right now in college basketball, can you name for me a team or 2 that you feel has the most versatility in styles that they can play, that they would be the hardest to throw something that they can't answer for because they can play the greatest variation of ways? Which teams jump out in that regard?
Right now, Florida, Alabama, although I don't know if they could really turn around and beat you on inside play. I think Texas A&M in that league can play different ways. I don't think there's any question about that. Closer to home, I would go, or closer to your area, I would definitely say Purdue has got different ways because Braden Smith can do a lot of different things. He is about as efficient, not only what you see with your eyes, but what you read in the numbers as you can possibly be. And the level of improvement in a Trey Kaufman-Wren, and even Lawyer, so much better defensively this year. Like, they can do a lot of different things. Another team that I think last night was an aberration with how many threes they shot, but St. John's can do that because their defense is so good, and so that they could play different ways offensively, but they're like the one team that I've seen lately in person that their defense can carry them even if they're not scoring. But again, like I said, they're not going to win taking 37 threes because they just don't shoot the ball well enough. But there are probably some others. Duke, potentially, because they can shoot the ball at a high level, where they're so much better. Cooper Flagg is tremendously improved. Con Knippel is improved. But what they've done with Kaman Malawach defensively and his ability to switch and guard the ball. I did the Carolina-Duke game for Westwood One Radio a couple weeks ago. Watched the walkthrough and then did the game, and I was, like, blown away for how long he could stay in his stance defensively. So when you got teams that are getting better, have versatility like that, they can play different ways offensively, but, like, you're really not going to hurt them on the defensive end because they have that ability to switch. I think it all is going to come down to the teams that are going to win it are going to get two things: the most consistent guard play and the best rim protection. And however that comes, whether it's block shots, charges, getting back in transition, swarming to the ball, whatever it is. At the end of the day, that's what I think the difference is.
When you mentioned, Tom Crean is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. When you mentioned great guard play, and you talked about Purdue there with Braden Smith, Matt Painter, coach, at least from the outside, it seems as though Matt Painter is kind of carrying the flag for the old school way of running a program, right? Like, not necessarily getting portal heavy, not getting, I know they do NIL, but you get where I'm going there, and building from within. Can he sustain that? Can he be that iconoclast for a decade, or eventually is everybody going to have to conform to what you're talking about in terms of the new faces wearing name tags for the first 6 months era of college basketball?
No, I think he can. I think he can because he identifies people so well. You know, and I wasn't in Indiana when Braden Smith was coming out, but the more you watch him, I'd like to think that I'd have said, hey, that's a Jordan Hulse type guy. You know, a little bit different body, but that's a Jordan Hulse type. And so you would recruit him. Well, Matt was smart enough to go do it, right? And what Matt does, this is why I've always thought, like, he would be a great NBA coach if he really wanted to be. And I have no idea if he'd ever want to be, but I think he'd be really good at it because he changes. He's a developer, right? There's no doubt about that. They develop their players. I mean, you could go 30, 40 years and have a harder time finding somebody that improved more from start to finish than what Zach Edey did compared to where he was to where he came. And not just because he was big, but the versatility that he built into him. But he's done that forever. I mean, back when I was coaching against him, he morphed into different systems and styles based on his personnel. I leave, and then he's got Carson Edwards, Ryan Klein. So now all of a sudden, he's doing way more off double staggers and misdirections and screens and things like that. And then he's got Edey, so he's playing a totally different way. I think that's why it would work for him. The evaluation, certainly I don't think there's any program that's not going to have to go into the portal at some point, not to build their team necessarily, but to add to their team. I think Duke's a great example of that right now with getting pieces that really, really fit that team. And look what he did with Mason Gillis. And if Duke's going to really, really win this year, at the end of the day, you're going to come back and say Mason Gillis had a lot to do with that. So I think Matt can keep doing it. I don't think there's any question he can. I think as long as the whole key for him, and the guys that have done this really well have kept staffs together that really understand what the head coach wants and what the head coach is all about, who fits them, how they coach, how they fit. To me, at Purdue, it's not about who the assistants want. It's not about who the assistants migrate to. It's not about what their favorites are. It's certainly not about the rankings. It's about how do they fit Matt Painter. And I think that's exactly why it works, and I think it'll continue to work. And I think in his involvement as a coach over all these years, I don't have any reason to believe that he wouldn't be able to get the guys he wants out of the portal. And if he couldn't find a Braden Smith point guard in Indiana, he's certainly not afraid to go to Texas or the Eastern Seaboard or the prep schools and find one. So I think he's got that covered.
When you look at your career, Coach, if you look at it, would you say that you more learned like the nuances of coaching and play in the first 3 or handful of years that you were coaching as a head coach, or in the first handful of years that you have been now broadcasting and being able to analyze different teams every single night and watch it from afar as opposed to from the inside?
I'd say both. I think you have to constantly evolve. I would have never been able to be at Marquette, but most importantly, be in that first few years at Indiana, which were just, as you know, they were just so tumultuous. People don't even believe it. Like, so I don't even tell people anymore. Like, they can't even believe some of the stuff that was going on. But I could have never handled that job if I hadn't worked for Ralph Willard for 4 years at Western Kentucky and 1 year at Pittsburgh. And the people that don't know him, his son is Kevin Willard, who's at Maryland. But I was so fortunate to be with him because I learned so much. And then I went with Tom Izzo, and we were able to take some of the things that we did there with him, like individual instruction, which I learned so much from him about, with the individual development of the players, because he had taken it from Rick Pitino, who had taken it from Hugh B. Brown, and then sending 4 to the offensive glass, things that became staples for Tom's teams, after my first 4 years there, were things I was able to bring with from him. So I think, in all honesty, the involvement has got to be constant. But in the sense of where I'm at now, I don't think I've ever seen the game better than I see it now. I don't think I've ever learned more. I'm outside right now because I know I was getting ready to get on this call, but like my days, if I'm at home and if I'm traveling, it's different. Like yesterday was traveling back from Marquette from doing that game Tuesday night. But like I'm in the film 7, 8, maybe 9 hours a day. And that's where the studio stuff is so great because you got to know it all. And I think I learned so much. And I study college during the day, and then I watch NBA at night because my son is with the Dallas Mavericks. And then I've got, all these different guys that are playing in the NBA. So I want to watch them and be able to help them. And so, like, I've never learned more than I have doing this. And the way I can sit at the table or do the radio and see the game, that energizes me because sometimes when you're coaching, you have blinders on because it's about your team. It's about the tunnel vision. You're dealing with so many things. The referees, you're dealing with all of that. You're dealing with all the adjustments. But I feel like I got a much clearer picture of so many more things now with television, without a doubt.
Do you get the itch then to get back to it?
Well, my mind's open on that. Yeah, I'm not like obsessed with like, man, I got to coach. Like I would do it because my mind's open on it, but I have no interest in going somewhere where I got to beat my head against the wall to get support or to be aligned with people. I have no desire for that. And the money thing doesn't bother me. My last year at Georgia was the first year of NIL. We had $4,200. We had 7 guys get $600 to do a 3-hour clinic for kids. We had 2 more guys get $1,000 from Crystal Burgers. There's probably not an SEC school, including Georgia, that's under $4 million a year right now.
Well, you look at the rankings, right? What do you got? 9 teams ranked in the SEC. Are we seeing a shift to the SEC now? Is this going to be a long-standing shift? When you look at the SEC, you mentioned Alabama, Florida, obviously Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky, goes without saying, Texas A&M, Missouri. When you look at that, is this a permanent shift to the SEC as a basketball power, or is it all cyclical just based on recruiting cycles?
Oh, I don't think it's going away in the SEC. I don't think it's going to go away. Now, will they be the dominant conference every year? No, I don't know if that's going to happen because other teams, the parity is only going to grow. But again, you can have all the money in the world, okay, and if you don't evaluate players and if you don't get the players that can play for the head coach, and if you don't have the ability to mesh those guys together, going back to your first question about it's ongoing. People will be developing the chemistry of their team going into the morning of the national championship game. That's just the reality of what it is now. You're constantly trying to find the buttons, because the mental states of people, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the NFL, whether it's college basketball, college football, it's always up for grabs. I mean, there's so many distractions in this world that you've got to keep trying to find those buttons to get people to go. But the SEC has done a phenomenal job. Greg Sankey is absolutely as well-rounded and as good a leader as there is, because it's, in my mind, when he walks into the room, he's probably the smartest guy in the room, but he also brings in other really smart people. And I think what he did when he took that job over is he brought in basketball people like Mike Tranghese from the Big East, who's as good a commissioner as there ever was. He brought in Dan Leibovitz, who's now running the Big East basketball side, but he brought him in for the basketball portion. He's done a great job with getting his referee directors in there. Like, they got a lot of things covered. But the Big Ten is growing. The Big 12 is charismatic and trying to really build up. I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon, but it's going to really come down to, like I said, can you evaluate? Can you get the right people? Can you develop the talent? And if you lose somebody, can you turn around and get somebody just as good or even better and not panic because you lost them?
Coach, when you look back, you mentioned at Indiana, the situation that you walked into, which was
Sure.
starting from, you had to build literally on an empty lot, right, and build the house back up. What is your overall assessment and feeling of the situation at Indiana currently?
It's hard. I mean, there's no doubt. I didn't see the game the other night against Michigan State because I was working, but the job is you got to wear a lot of hats in that job. I mean, you just have to, and it's always harder for me if I haven't seen anybody practice, because I really hate the judgments if I haven't seen them practice. And I've never seen Mike's team's practice, so I don't have that assessment. I care about people back there that I worked with, like Jordan Halls, Calbert, Cheney, Tim Carl, Dr. Rink, people like that. But I don't ask them about the team. Like, I might send an encouraging note or text, but I don't ask them about that. When I watch them play from the analyst view, their guard play is so inconsistent. And you got a lot of guys that have some talent, but it's just been hard to get that group to mesh together. And there's times the passing can be up for grabs, which leads to poor shooting. The decision-making can be up for grabs, which leads to turnovers and forced shots. You no matter where you coach, you want an identity. And you want that identity. It's like kind of the question you asked about the teams that can adjust to certain things. That identity's got to be able to travel with you. It's got to be able to be at home. It's got to be able to come back down 8 with 4 minutes to go, down 6, 2 minutes to go. It's got to be able to do that. And there's got to be a belief in one another and how you make each other better. And to me, it's just there's too many fundamental things when you see some of the passes, some of the decisions, what happens if a play breaks down, that just haven't been close to consistent enough to win against other really good teams on a consistent level. And that just becomes a part of a whole. That's not a judgment on Mike. That's not a judgment on the staff. And it's really not a judgment on the team. It's just kind of what it is. And those are the things to me that are really, really tough.
When
but
you look at the fact,
the board, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you look at the fact now that, and I mean this as, and I'm not trying to put you in a position to say anything disrespectful to Archie Miller, Mike Woodson, but they are now in their third coaching search since you left. And in addition to that, we have human nature, right? And your name has come up a lot amongst Indiana fans now of, gosh, maybe we did have it better than we realized in the moment, right, at the end of your tenure there. Do you feel vindicated?
No, I don't like that. I still feel bad, right? Like, I feel bad that it ended when it did. I mean, I do think we had people, and the administration's different. So I'm not saying about this current administration. It's almost like those Big Ten championships, those are really, really, really hard to get. Like, that grind of the season is a bear, no matter what league you're in. Getting to Sweet 16s, overcoming adversity, overcoming injuries. And at the end of the day, really, we couldn't overcome the injuries. The one that killed us visibly was the fact we lost OG Anunoby, who was a lottery pick at the time, and had 18 games. He missed 18 games. But the one that killed us, that people didn't see as much, was losing Colin Hartman, our only senior, right? Because he was such a conduit to what we did. We can go back to his sophomore year. We don't beat Maryland at home one night if Colin's not at the 5 drilling threes on their 5-man that can't come out. So we just didn't have – I knew it, and I really knew it after that last Big Ten championship in Sweet 16, that the support wasn't there. And you can tell it, and that I chose to stay with it. I chose to be there because I believed in those kids, and I knew that Thomas Bryant stayed a lot because of me. I knew that OG was not ready to leave yet, and we had guys back, and it is what it is. But vindication, no. Confident that we were doing a lot of really good things, yes. And but none of it was a real surprise. And it didn't just start when we got let go. It really started years earlier. And that's the kind of stuff that's hard. So you never, I don't live in woe is me world on that, but you live with that, right? And I feel for the coaches that are in there. I felt for Kevin Wilson. I felt for Tom Allen. I don't even know Tom Allen. I don't know Kurt Zignetti. But coaching is really, really hard. And these coaches that come out, well, we're getting threats, and they're saying this. Man, live our life. We dealt with the same thing there. I mean, it's part of life.
Would you go back?
That's a hypothetical that I'm not touching, because that's kind of been there, done that type of thing. I don't see that in the cards. I really don't. So I don't really think in that terms of that. But we loved it there. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of what it takes to be a good coach there in my mind. And because the fans don't want a CEO now. They want somebody grassroots that they can touch, that they can feel a part of and connected to, and that makes them feel a total part of it. We never get that program back without that type of mentality and building it up, because they didn't just show up because it was Indiana. I mean, there had to be a real feel of a connection to it. And that's why I'm so proud of the way it all came back, because it doesn't come back without the fans. But you had to make sure the fans knew that they were absolutely needed from day one.
There's this narrative out there, Coach. Tom Crean is our guest. You would know this better than anybody, because you probably did see both sides of, the plus and minuses of a passionate fan base, right? Is Indiana a job? We in Indiana think that Indiana is still, and I remember, when you got there, you're like, look, it's Indiana, right? That's why you come here. But
Sure,
we still think that Indiana is Indiana, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. Do coaches in the coaching world, where do they see the Indiana job? Is there a toxicity at all about the passion of the fan base? And I don't mean that to knock. I mean, I graduated from Indiana, right? You get where I'm going there. Is it still seen as the creme de la creme job that it is always thought to have been labeled as?
Well, in full honesty, when it comes to other coaches, I really don't talk to enough of them to know, to be honest with you on that. I do know this. I know that it would be hard-pressed for somebody in their heart of hearts to think that it's not. Now, they may say something to the media. The media may portray it a certain way. They may look at it that, come on, man, it's Indiana in a way that it's what Bob Knight did there, what was done there. You're not taking that away. Is it harder now? Absolutely, it's harder now. Is there more parity? Is there more money? Is there all that? Yeah, everything's there. But you tell me a place to coach when that place is jumping and that place is packed and those fans are lined up and those students are lined up and they want to come in there. You tell me a tougher place for an opponent to go and a better place for a coach to coach. And I'll fly there tomorrow, because I have not seen it.
Is there anybody that you personally think of and think that's the perfect kind of guy for Indiana?
No, not really. I think it's more I think a lot of that is going to come down to, in this day and age, with the revenue share, with the NIL money and things like that, I think buyouts could certainly play a way into that. Maybe it doesn't. I don't think it. I don't have a preference person. Plus, I wouldn't do that with covering these guys now and the television part guys that are currently coaching. But I do think there's a template for what it's got to be, and it's got to be somebody that absolutely, like I said, it's not a CEO type of job. It's a grassroots job. It's one that you've got to come in and understand that every person that walks in to that building could come from a different area, different part of life, different part of Indiana, but every one of them matter a great deal. It's not about how much corporate money you get. It's not about how you just wine and dine the people that have all the money. It's how the grassroots people there feel that they are absolutely connected, because that's how it got built. And that can be as hokey as anybody wants to say it is. It's the truth. It's the truth. You've got to have money to build it. You've got to have money to get players. I get all that. I don't think Indiana's ever going to be at a money loss when it comes to those things. But that place is special because the fans make it that way. And I've said this many times. I don't have it. I don't begrudge the fans that we left there. I mean, our deal was administratively and some board trustees, right? I mean, I get that. So I don't have any issue with that. You take the tough days with the good, but at the end of the day, if you're really playing hard, there's an identity that they can grasp upon, I should say, and they feel connected to the level of toughness, commitment, camaraderie, and passion that those players are feeling. Those fans are the greatest in the world, even when you're down. I mean, we don't ever turn the program without that. I can go back to the game where we came all the way back against Illinois or Ohio State and games like that when we were trying to turn it. We weren't in it because we were good enough. We were in it because the fans were doing everything they could do to see us win the game. And those are the greatest moments you can ever have, knowing that you've got a fan base there that just absolutely wants to see you be successful. They just want to feel a part of it, and they want to feel that you're giving your very best.
Lastly, Coach, you mentioned that you still follow, obviously, your former players that are playing in the NBA. You've got some really good ones. That goes without saying. How happy are you for Thomas Bryant in the fact that that might be the acquisition of the year for the Pacers, to be able to get him and put him in position where when his number was called, he was ready to go? And I'm assuming that didn't surprise you, but how much do you still interact with him?
Absolutely. I mean, he's had a couple of tough runs the last couple of years. I mean, he went from being a guy that spent time in the Lakers in the G League to going to the Wizards and becoming the all-time leading field goal percentage in a year's time, to dealing with injuries, to moving around. He was playing really well with the Lakers. They don't necessarily like the role when AD comes back, so he goes to the Nuggets, he gets the ring, and we go right on down the line. That dude is always ready. He has always been ready because the energy is for real. The energy is ongoing. The emotion is ongoing. He really, really, really wants to be successful. And when you get around him, you can't help but, because his energy is so contagious, you can't help but feel that. And I don't think it's coincidental that him coming in, that energy, the team like Halliburton and guys like that getting a better defensive will, disposition, mindset, whatever you want to call it. I think it all coincides together, and I think Thomas loves it there. I think he loves how he's being coached. I think he loves how their commitment to what they're trying to do defensively, and he is a heck of a conduit to your energy being on an uptick and upgraded because he's on the floor with you, and he's an efficient, reliable player.
What's the next game where we're going to see you or hear you doing analysis for it?
Well, next week gets busy again. I've got I did Marquette DePaul at Marquette the other night for Peacock, which was great. I've got Texas Tech at TCU Tuesday, Wichita at South Florida. Those are ESPN 2 games, I believe, and then I'm in the studio. So I'll be in the studio a lot, not this weekend, but starting the weekends after that, and so it's just a lot of study and preparation time for that. Our son is with the Mavericks, I mentioned. He comes home tomorrow for the All-Star break, so we get to see him a little bit. Our kids are all spread out, so you don't ever take those moments for granted. But it's been busy. It's been good, but I love it. I love being busy.
Well, Coach, we appreciate it. And in that busy schedule, I'm just going to go ahead and commit you right now to at some point during March Madness to coming back on. But we do appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Appreciate it very much, and we'll certainly be watching and listening as well to all of the analysis from Tom Crean.
Jake. Anytime.
All right, Tom Crean, former Indiana coach, and of course, as we mentioned there, Peacock, ESPN, ESPN Plus, all the different places you can see him on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Really good stuff, and in particular about that Indiana job. We'll come back, kind of rehash that, go over some of the things that he said about that, and little IHSAA chat. A little heavy on that. I apologize. We will do that in just a couple of minutes as we roll along here on a Thursday on Query & Company.
Indiana Donor Network
Thanks to Tom Crean. That will be up on the podcast center at 1075thefan.com later today. Really good stuff there. And in particular, talking about, and I think one of the things that was interesting was him, talking about, and I guess Purdue has used the transfer portal. I mean, obviously, we saw it a year ago. They got really good guard play from guys, right, that come in towards the end there. But the reality is that Matt Painter is kind of the face of just that consistency in terms of the kind of coach. And I thought it was interesting when he said Matt Painter would be a good NBA coach because he recognizes players and then is able to build around. He has a very clear idea, does Matt Painter, of who and what he wants his players and his program to be. And somebody already pointed out to me, Tom Crean is pure class when asked about Indiana and talking about the Indiana assessment, and notice he did not say no. No, I don't know that he would return to Indiana, but I do think that there are people now, that myself included, that look back and understand all that went into when he was the head coach at Indiana, the stability that, even though there was some rocky stuff towards the end there, certainly was more stable than it has been since. No question about that. Pacers, big win last night. We talked about Thomas Bryant with Tom Crean. We'll get back into that on the other side. And then Joel A. Erickson joining us coming up about 20 minutes from now, talking a little Colts here on Query & Company. All-Star break is upon us for the Pacers. Last night winning it, and I'll tell you what, certainly didn't look good for like 75% of that game. And one of the things, Eddie, you mentioned it, that Indiana again, yin and yang. You can look at the Pacers and be impressed by, or for lack of a better term, relieved by the fact that they're able to come back from deficits. Mm-hmm. But they've got to, at some point, when you start getting into, especially in the postseason, you get down to 15 to a New York, you get down 15 to a Milwaukee, you get down 15 to certainly a Boston, a Cleveland, it's over. And the slow starts or the lulls that come, one of the interesting things about that is it is a team that we have built up or kind of hung the hat on the fact of they are so deep and that they can score. But in that same fashion, it's a little bit enigmatic why they keep putting themselves in these positions. Now, again, you got to give them credit for crawling their way out of it. But at the same time, it certainly feels like they're playing with fire a little bit. And eventually that's going to hurt them.
6 straight games where they have fallen behind by at least 15, and so since the West Coast trip started in Utah, they have been behind for over 200 minutes. Almost nearly 5 games they've been trailing. They've only had the lead for like 38 minutes, and somehow they were 3-3 during the last 6 games leading up to the All-Star break. And the one thing that I think stands out to me that I've started to notice and question a little bit during these lulls in the first half where the slow starts in the first quarters is that the Pacers need like some sort of leader, someone to step up and be like, hey, give me the ball and I'll will us back into this one. And I think that has to be Mathurin for sure, just because he's the only one that has that mentality. But with
Siakam does a little bit, don't you think?
A little bit, but it's not like he's the one who can bring the ball up the court and initiate the offense
right
all the time. You can at least somewhat do that with Ben.
Yeah, I mean, Mathurin definitely has, what do I call it, like a dog mentality of just like
get the hell out of the way.
Get the hell out of the way, guy, right? And by the way, as I was listening to the game last night, because I went to the Fuel game last night. They took on the Florida Everblades, goons. Those guys are goons. But first off, the Fishers Event Center is really nice. That's now I've been up there for the volleyball as well. First time I've seen it from a hockey standpoint. It's great. It's a great venue. Fuel games are just fun, man. Nitro came over. I got my picture with Nitro. I mean, I'm literally like a 9-year-old. I was super excited to get my picture with Nitro.
That was not the only thing that happened last night, right, Jake?
I got on the Jumbotron. First time in my life. Do you know that? That's the first time in my life. And do you know how excited I was to get on the Jumbotron? Or is that what we call it now? Do we still call it a Jumbotron?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a high def. But
what else would you call it?
First time, to my knowledge, the first time that I've ever been on a Jumbotron, and I've never been more excited in my life. I actually, are you ready for this? I actually took a picture of it. I took a picture of the Jumbotron. Look, both of us, we're on the Jumbotron. I took the picture. Do you know how excited I was?
He did take the picture. He did show me. So
yes.
I can't believe him.
First thing that I showed you today, I'm like, look at this. But we had a great time at the game. Florida's really good. And I think 6-2 was the final.
Everblades?
It is a cool name, is it not?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to give them credit. So I was listening to the Pacer game on the way home, and at that point the Pacers were down, like they were in that 12-15 range, and then they obviously made the push. They tied it back up, and that's when Benedict Mathurin really kind of took over. But as I was listening to the game, and I want you to tell me if you think I'm wrong here, okay?
Okay.
I know that he has been on great teams, and therefore my rule is negated because he's been on great teams. But now that he's on a team where he's a little bit more of a straw mixing drink, so to speak, Jordan Poole is the definition of a 2025 guy.
Yeah. He was the definition of that even when he was on the Warriors.
I think Draymond Green knew that he was the definition of it when he was on the Warriors, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
For those unfamiliar, if you're just joining the show.
Where have you been?
The 2025 guy is Aquariism, meaning somebody who is destined to average 20 a game on a 25-win team for the vast majority of their career.
I don't know if Washington's going to get to 20 wins.
You're right. He might be a 2020 guy, right?
2015, probably.
It is. It's unbelievable how bad they are. But Siakam is the one player that they have, Eddie, that it feels like offensively the one player that Indiana has where you say, okay, in an offensive set, if the ball goes into Siakam, at that point he can start breaking people down. And he's the one guy that can kind of get his own shot regardless of even doubles come over. Now, he does a good job of passing out of those, but when the problem is when you need – he is not necessarily a points in a flurry flash kind of guy. Mathurin can be because Mathurin's a little Vinnie Johnson-esque. He the microwave, if you will. Mathurin, when he gets it going, then and he warms it up, right? Then he's definitely like can score in bunches, and we saw it last night. But because you have the Mathurin-Nesmith situation as well in a starting lineup, which of the two would you rather see as the starter?
Right now, and I know people are going to get all upset with how I say this, I'm going to say Aaron Nesmith, and I'm going to side with Rick Carlisle because when Rick was asked about the switch, he said that it helps the Pacers get Mathurin more involved offensively when he's coming off the bench and he's able to, be the offense, get his confidence up, and then most of the time it doesn't matter who's starting, it matters who's finishing, and Mathurin has finished on the floor in the fourth quarter with the starters, I think the last 2 games. So I still lean towards Neesmith starting over Mathurin just because I think it works out the best for Mathurin and for the Pacers.
Yeah, I would agree. The question becomes this, and to this point, I will give Mathurin a lot of credit, right? And by that I mean there is a mentality that has to come with coming off the bench, even if Mathurin is getting the same amount of minutes that he would get in the sixth-man role that he was getting as a starter. There is something for a lot of guys about just the fact of, like, you're part of the starting group. Mathurin, for a guy that is seemingly has that kind of dog get-out-of-the-way mentality, to this point, he doesn't appear to have any issue at all with being the guy that is – and I don't know that this was always the case with him. I don't know, especially when he first came in, and he gets a lot of credit in this regard to this point. When Benedict Mathurin was drafted, the wide thought, the overwhelming thought was this is the next guy. Mm-hmm. This is one that is going to be, because of where he was acquired. He was a top 10 pick. The Pacers had not had that since George McLeod. And George McLeod presents a little bit of a forecast there as well, because George McLeod, when he was drafted in '89, and the Pacers thought he was going to be a 6'8" point guard, and they miscast him, and Dick Versace wanted him, with the basketball in his hands, and McLeod had there was some personal tragedy that took place in his life very early in his time here. We don't need to go into all of that because it was, 37 years ago. But he just kind of never fell into the role that was designed for him here. But what you learned about George McLeod was then he went to Dallas and became a prolific outside shooter and a really good player in the NBA because he was in a role that he was more comfortable. In Mathurin's case, it seemed like he was comfortable and okay with being a guy that, in fact, was one of the faces. We were joking about it at the time when I was on the morning show with Kevin that the statue of Benedict Mathurin.
Build thy statue.
That's right. I remember in one of the games when he was a rookie, watching him come off the floor and sending a tweet that said, Mathurin is that dude, and he knows he's that dude. Well, then you had the next step of Halliburton. You had the acquisition of Siakam. You had the development of Nembhard. And so the expectation or the necessity of what Mathurin had to bring to the table changed. The definition changed. And he gets a lot of credit to this point for seemingly being comfortable with that. I'm not saying that it was always that easy. I'm sure behind the scenes there were probably, in fact, some hard conversations. But they definitely challenged him a year ago defensively and limited him in minutes at times because they were challenging him defensively. And I think he's answered that. I think so far, and I'm not talking about one thing that we don't know is, when you hear people say, like, well, you've never been in the locker room. Actually, in the Pacers case, I have been in the locker room. Okay? But that phrase itself, there is truth to that. And we don't know what does go on all the time, on the plane, in the hotel, etc. I mean, you never know the dynamics of it, right? Like, people wouldn't know, Eddie, they wouldn't gather in listening to this radio station that in the off hours that you and I and Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, and Corbin, and we're hanging out 8-10 hours a day. I mean, I'm around here all the time, right?
Yeah.
I'm bringing you guys food. We hang out. We play cards. We play Uno. All of it, right? All the time. People 100%. Wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know it unless you're in the building.
That's right.
But you wouldn't know. I don't know what goes on in those aspects, but seemingly now he is accepting the role that he has. And I agree with you that I think having Matherin, the important thing is not necessarily who always starts a game, but who finishes it. And more often than not, he has been a finisher for them, right?
Our mutual friend, I don't know if he's a friend for you, Jake, or not. Vince Morales texted me, and he said that you have been put on the Jumbotron at Marion football games.
Oh, that is correct. That's correct. That one I didn't. He is correct. Marion basketball. It was Marion basketball.
Okay.
I went to go see Marion play Taylor, and Vince spotted me in the crowd, and I think they might have actually mentioned me in the broadcast. This one I just was they.
Same for the Indy Ignite. They put you on the television.
Did they put me on the TV?
Yeah, they're like, oh, look at that. Some local celebrities, media celebrities,
Yeah.
Jake Query and Kevin Bowen.
By the way, when as a joke, when my buddy Matt Jacklin got married, my groomsman gift, because it was like 20 years ago, he got me a T-shirt that says local celebrity. And when I did the great purge, post-heart attack purge of all of my possessions, because Jacklin got me the T-shirt, I kept it. Now, would I be the biggest jackass on earth if I actually publicly wore my T-shirt that says local celebrity? Because we both know that I'm not. Yeah, I mean, and I'm being totally serious. I know that I'm not, right?
Right.
But there are people that would wear being serious, right?
I think we know people that would wear that shirt.
If I wore, I'll wear it here sometime on the show. Can you imagine? People are going to be like, really? I mean, how lame is that?
I mean,
right?
this guy already thinks he's the best looking guy on face of the earth, so.
How do you think I ended up on the Jumbotron, Eddie?
Okay, Ron Perlman.
That might have been because of the other half of the shot. In terms of the local celebrity aspect, like I always say, if you have to tell people who and what you are, you aren't, right? Joel A. Erickson is the Colts beat writer for the Indianapolis Star. He also happens to be our next guest. Okay, so everybody knows this by now, right? Eddie, you know this song's significance to pop culture in the 80s, correct?
No.
First ever video on MTV.
Ah, really?
Video killed the radio star. And I think second was Pat Benatar, third was Jay Giles. I believe that's correct. But last night, I mean, radio star is obviously absurd. Radio employee. Last night on the Jumbotron, I guess video killed the radio employee, if you will, right? I guess depending on where this this show goes. I shouldn't say anything yet. Eddie just looked up at me terrified. Do you know something I don't, Jacob? Maybe. I don't know. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that introduction, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, he is the beat writer for the Indianapolis Colts, Joel A. Erickson, joining us on the show. Joel, I went to the Indy Fuel game last night, and I got on the Jumbotron. Have you been on the Jumbotron at a sporting event before?
I have. When I was in college, I was on an internship, and I was at a baseball game with a young lady, and we were on the Jumbotron during the kiss cam portion for like an entire half inning.
Really?
And didn't realize it.
Did you kiss the young lady?
Not on the Jumbotron.
Wait. You were one of those jackasses on the kiss cam that decided not to kiss, and then the crowd went into a frenzy?
We legitimately did not see that we were on it the entire half inning. It was great fun for the entire minor league baseball stadium.
And was this the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers?
No, this was Scranton, and I cannot remember what their.
That would be the Scranton Wilkes-Barre. Now hold on, it has something to do with Barons, isn't it? Aren't they like the Red Barons?
It's completely escaping me now.
You've got the
Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders.
Rail Riders. Okay, well, build your own joke on the kiss cam. Okay, Joel. Just out of curiosity, is that young lady now Mrs. Erickson?
It is not.
Okay.
It is not.
Is Mrs. Erickson familiar with the situation and thrilled with the fact you did not kiss?
She has heard this story before, yes, and laughed at me quite heartily.
Does it make me a bad person if anytime somebody gets engaged on the Jumbotron, I root for either annulment or divorce? I'm not going to lie to you.
Sure, but I will say this. Every time that happens at a game I'm at, I look around and I say, that person, like, they better either be, like, as a couple, just the biggest fans of that team, or it has to be their first date or something. Like, if you're proposing to your significant other and they're not that into whatever team you're at, you've blown your proposal.
No question.
That's my take.
No question, right? Like, just for example, just out of curiosity, how did your wife like it when you proposed at the Brewers game? Was she good? When Bernie went down the slide with the ring, was she cool with it?
That's not how I proposed, but man, some Brewers fan needs to put his significant other at the bottom of the slide. He needs to slide down and pop up at the ring and hope he doesn't break his arm the way that one Dodgers radio announcer did that.
Correct. All right, Joel, let's get to this. Obviously, for the Colts, I'll ask you actually what I've asked a couple of people in watching the Super Bowl. When I was watching the Super Bowl, there was something that jumped out at me in relation to, if you were to quote-unquote localize the story, the Colts. Mm-hmm. When you watched and you saw that game, was there anything in any way, shape, or form with either team that jumped out at you where you said to yourself, that is either something the Colts glaringly can't do, or here's a level of optimism because this team, that is, the Colts do one thing that they do, and they can build on that. Either one of those jump out at you.
Well, I think this happens every time I watch the Eagles, I feel like, the last 4 or 5 years. Ballard's belief that you build through the offensive and defensive lines it seems to be validated every time the Eagles make a run, and also alternately every time the Chiefs lose a Super Bowl, because when they lose a Super Bowl, it's because they've got pass rushers just coming willy-nilly at Patrick Mahomes. It's just you have to do it better than he's done it. You have to have more dominant lines than he's had, more deep lines than he's had, especially on the defensive side of the ball, than to be able to pull that off. But it's definitely a way to win. I mean, the Eagles, brought them to submission by just rushing four, which was the previous defensive strategy. Now, I'm not crazy. Does Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and Darius Slay and the secondary the Eagles have assembled help them do that. But it also does, like, you can win games in the NFL with the defensive and offensive lines. Ballard's just got to do a better job of it.
Joel A. Erickson, our guest, joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Okay, Joel, let's shift to this. Upcoming, the next kind of calendar of events, if you will be the combine going into the draft. I feel like personally, the Colts kind of are in position of they don't even need to go like, look, they got to get a they're not a missing piece away. They're in a position where, unless it's pass rush, I guess, because we've done that so many times, whoever's on the board, if there's a can't miss at 14, seemingly it's going to be, I think it's 14 they take. It's a position that they have need. I think they have needs all over the place and that they shouldn't zero in on necessarily one specific thing. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking at places that I wouldn't necessarily draft at 14 just because of positional need, you're talking running back and wide receiver are probably the only two I wouldn't go. I mean, defensive line, I see what you're saying, but if they lose Odengbo and, say, release Ebicom or they're not sure about Ebicom, all of a sudden that becomes a need too. So I'm with you. I think you can pick just about anything. You just need to get good players out of it. They have not put themselves in a position right now before free agency to do what the Eagles did last year and just go, we're just drafting defensive backs because that's the only hole we've left on our roster.
Here's the thing, Joel. If you look at the Colts free agents, okay, I'm going to give you we'll break it down. I'll just name off 5 at a time here. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to tell me, of the 5, the one that you think the Colts should most prioritize, and then in addition to that, the one, if any, that you think would actually have their phone ringing fairly quickly as soon as free agency begins. Okay? Group 1, Ryan Kelly.
From the Colts or from the NFL?
From the NFL. I'm saying, like, guys that other teams actually would have an interest in. Ryan Kelly, Mo Alley Cox, Joe Flacco, E.J. Speed, Julian Blackmon.
Out of that group, the guy that I think I want back most is Mo Alley Cox, and that has a lot to do with his cost and the role he plays.
Okay.
There's a lot of times you say that, and people are like, well, he's not a number 1 tight end. I don't want him to be a number 1 tight end. I want him to this block. Everyone's got that guy, you know? And then the guy that I think their phone is probably ringing right away is Ryan Kelly. Not necessarily here because they've set themselves up in a position where they've got, you know, a center they drafted, and they've kind of been preparing for this. But
and you know what, Joel? Listen, I bag on Chris Ballard a lot. We all do. I'll give him credit here in this regard. I think Bortolini looks like a guy that is going to be a nice, serviceable, long-term transition into the center position and is ready to go. Yeah,
and the reason I think the NFL is going to call Ryan Kelly is that I feel like there's a veteran center who ends up signing somewhere for big money every year. It feels like that's him this year.
Okay, Group 2. Ashton Doolin, Taven Bryan, Dio, Ronnie Harrison, Danny Pinter.
I think Ashton Doolin will be back, first of all, and should be back because I didn't like watching them when he was out this year in terms of like what they were doing with the punting. I also say, but I think your original question, I want Dio back. And I also think he's going to have the most calls, and you might not get him back because his price might get out of range.
Fair enough. All right, next group. Yep. Trey Sermon, Kylan Granson, Sam Ellinger, Will Fries, Grant Stewart.
Will Fries, especially since you're the team that has his medicals and you know what's going on with the leg. And also Will Fries. The NFL is going to be very interested in Will Fries after the way he started last season. I think I saw one list that had him as the 19th best free agent in this class, even after the injury.
He also plays. He plays a position that if you can lock that down is really important, right? I mean, it's one of those positions that you kind of just hope to fill, and then you don't have to worry about it, so to speak, right? Because they don't grow on trees, which is why he's even coming off injury, why he's going to be a value.
Yeah, and we saw last year what happens when you take a big drop off there. Once he got hurt and you went through Dalton Tucker, and then Mark Glinski kind of stabilized it in the running game but didn't quite do it in the passing game, you realize how much it hurts when you don't have a good player at right guard.
Okay, then lastly, Grant Stewart, by the way, has a little bit of value, doesn't he, from a special team standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those special teams, captain, guys who play all 4 special teams. And I think the fact that he can step in in a pinch and play a pretty decent linebacker probably helps him too. He's got some value. He's probably got some value in like the, a little bit less than what EJ Speed got a couple years ago when he got like 2 years and $8 million or something like that, just to be that special teams guy. The Colts have had that guy leave in free agency for somebody like that leave in free agency for decent money a handful of times now.
By the way, are we done with the Kylan Granson experiment?
I think so.
Sam Ehlinger, same thing?
Ehlinger I could see coming back because he's not going to – I can't imagine him having an enormous market, and you have the emergency quarterback thing. So I could see him coming back.
Okay, here's a really good question for you, Joel. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I need you to put on – as a matter of fact, Eddie, did you happen to just see a slight breeze? Did you feel a breeze that just came into the room by any chance, Eddie? Was that just me? You'd asked me if it was warm in here. All of a sudden, is there a cool air? Oh, it's our friend Robin the Genie. Joel, have you met Robin the Genie before?
I have not.
Robin the Genie appeared, I can't remember when it was, about a year ago or so. I was walking down the street. And actually, I was pulling a Chris Ballard with the quarterback position. There was a can. I decided to kick it, right? So I was kicking the can down the street, and out popped Robin the Genie. And Robin is a nice guy, and he comes up with scenarios that if you answer correctly, he always promises future winnings based on the correct answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it looks like I think let me swing this mic over.
But his payout is quite hit or miss.
Careful what you say, Eddie. I will remember that if I owe you any money. Joel, my question for you is this. I am looking into the future, and in looking into the future, it is midway through the upcoming Colts season, and Anthony Richardson is injured and cannot play a game. I would like for you to tell me who will go in and start for the Colts in that situation coming up next season. And if you are correct, I will grant you at that time $1 million. Quite the payday from Robin the Genie, yes.
A big payout. I am going to go Daniel Jones.
Ooh. Daniel Jones, all right. I got to tell
you.
you.
Daniel Jones. I have a sneaking suspicion that Justin Fields is going to have more or better guarantees of playing time somewhere else.
Do you think the money would be too much for him, too?
It shouldn't be. I don't know that he's going to get a starter's level contract, so it'd probably be more than people might not like the initial number they see because quarterback numbers have kind of exploded to a point where it kind of breaks everybody's brain, including mine. But they've got Richardson on a rookie deal. They need to do something to be better next year. I would say you pay him, you go for it if you can, but he's going to be looking for a situation where he can definitely start. And it didn't sound the last time we talked to Chris Ballard that he was going to offer that because I still wanted to give Richardson a chance.
By the way, Robin's waving frantically. It appears as though he has I didn't know Robin's a football fan. Yes, I have watched football many a year. So he has a question for Joel. Okay, Robin, go ahead. The floor is yours. Joel A. Erickson, my question for you is this. I am a huge fan of Aaron Rodgers because I have watched him play now for 812 years. But I'd like for you to tell me where you believe he will be playing next season. I didn't know Robin was an Aaron Rodgers fan. Okay, well, fair enough. Joel, any thoughts for Robin on that one?
Yeah, I was trying to figure this out yesterday, and I wasn't coming up with good options because it's got to be a team that feels like it's like a quarterback away. And I didn't necessarily felt like – And not like a great quarterback away, like just like a passable quarterback away. Steelers, maybe? We'll go Steelers.
Man. Minnesota? Could he do the Brett Favre complete?
If he does the Minnesota thing, I will laugh the way I did when you guys recorded me. That would tickle me so much.
Because of the fact that he would be going complete full circle on Brett Favre, right?
1,000%. And then I would just write down in a notebook somewhere, hey, by the way, Jordan Love is going to be a Jet in this year and then a Viking in this year.
So what we know is this. If for some reason I one day announce breaking news that Aaron Rodgers has signed with the Minnesota Vikings somewhere where the beer fairy has made visits on a many occasion, you will hear this coming out the windows. That is a true story. Look it up. That's a true story. Okay. That by the way, the maniacal laughter of Joel A. Erickson when he was watching some jackass for a half an inning not do the kiss cam, right?
Yes, 1,000%.
Joel, are they in watching the Super Bowl? I kept asking myself this: are the Colts, would you say, more so that far off, or really a tweak or two away from being competitive?
I think they're far off, and I think the hard part is that it really comes down to quarterback more so than the other stuff. They've got holes. I totally agree. They've got holes that they need to fill on the roster. I think those holes are a lot more easily filled than that quarterback position. And honestly, Colts fans know if you have the great quarterback, some of those holes don't seem as big because they just win games they have no business winning. That was the Andrew Luck story early on. The guy who my friend Kevin, who came and got us a new garage door opener yesterday, was saying that was with Peyton too. There were these games they'd give up 40 and Peyton would put up 47. If you have the great quarterback, it kind of makes all the rest of that stuff lessened. And they haven't had it for a while. And I think if you look at that as a tweak, if you look at it as, well, they only have to fix one spot, then yes, they're that tweak away. It's just that tweak is the hardest and most difficult one to fill in the NFL.
You just sitting at the bottom of the driveway, pushing that button, watching the garage door go up and down all day. new shiny toy, right? You're like the jerk when the phone book arrived. You're like, all right, let's go.
That's what my kids were doing. They were trying to hit the button while people were like standing in the way, and it's like, no, it doesn't.
Well,
we have a new garage door opener, so we don't close it on people.
So long as they know that when the beer fairy arrives in the middle of the night, the dog needs to be put up. We know that much, right? Ruins the whole surprise. Joel, the other thing that I was thinking about with the quarterback position, and you mentioned Daniel Jones, and what that does is that maybe that pushes Anthony Richardson a little bit, and maybe that's what he needs. Now, also, it maybe gives him eyes in the back of his head of Daniel Jones as a guy that could then take over and start for 5 games straight if you're playing well, because he has a lot of experience. So too did Joe Flacco. I get it, but he's more of a similar style as Richardson. But are the Colts now in a theory and a philosophy that Chris Ballard has had of being conservative when it comes to free agency money? Is he going to have to now start spending more money because he has to create competition at positions? Because there were too many guys, by his own admission, this is Chris Ballard speaking, not me, that he saw what happened when Alec Pierce looked and saw A.D. Mitchell drafted, and it created competition, and it raised a better game out of Alec Pierce. And too many guys on his roster, Chris Ballard's words, not mine, didn't have that competition and became complacent. Is he going to have to go out and spend, if nothing else, than to create that competition that he desires?
Yeah, I think so. Now, I don't think he necessarily has to pull a Jaguars and give 3 guys who are worth $12 million, $20 million, because we've seen how that works out for Jacksonville year over year. But like the signings he used to make earlier in his tenure, the Xavier Rhodes type signings, Rodney McLeod was one where they signed a guy who had been a starter the previous 8 years, and they didn't get him for a ton, or they didn't have to pay a ton for him. But you got a starter in there, and then when Nick Cross didn't work out in his rookie year, you had an actual starter to put in there. Now the rest of that year was was awful, but that's the kind of guy you can sign to get a starting caliber player. That's the thing I keep thinking about, is that sometimes when people hear the word competition, what they really mean is depth. They're thinking of just guys who can back up and maybe start. No, competition is like A.D. Mitchell. We didn't know when A.D. Mitchell got drafted that he wouldn't really be able to take Alec Pierce's job. But where he got drafted made you think that. You need guys who can be the starter, can take somebody's job. That's real competition, not just a backup who can maybe step in if things don't work out.
Speaking of not working out, let's go back to the girl that you took to the baseball game. Was this a date, or was it just a girl that you had a crush on during the internship? Like I when I was interning back when I was that age, and I've mentioned this story before, I met a girl, and I was like, well, this is great. I'll have like a little summer fling here, right? She was cool. We got along great, and probably the second or third time we were hanging out, she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to do anything this weekend because my boyfriend's in a band." She was from California, Willits, California. He's in a band, and they're coming here to New York. They've got a couple of shows in the Village. And I said, okay. And the band was called Green Day, right? And I thought, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. This guy's – how long is she going to hang out with some guy that's playing around in a band, right? No, I think actually she married him. I never really heard from her after that. What did happen with the girl from the baseball game?
We our internship ended and we went our separate ways.
Okay. And you went to college where?
Missouri.
And that's right, I knew that. And you were interning in Scranton, you said, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Was that at the office? Where was the internship?
I was I worked for the Wilkes-Barre paper.
Oh, okay.
The Citizen's Voice in Wilkes-Barre. I wrote about hill climb. They have a big hill climb up there. Wrote about triathlon and wrote about one of the premier semi-pro football teams in the country, or so I was told.
I'll be honest with you. I think Scranton Wilkes-Barre is actually kind of a cool area, though. It's the Poconos, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I did too. I did help out with 2 Pocono races. I was a pretty bad auto racing rider. We'll just be honest.
Are you still?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Now, do you know the name? Lastly, if you get this right, then I will give you the Robin $1 million. You ready? Pocono International Raceway. Do you know the actual town for the byline of where exactly the Pocono Raceway is located?
No. Nope. And I've been there twice, and I got no idea.
That would be Long Pond, Pennsylvania.
Long Pond.
Mm-hmm. I think there must be a pond. There must be a body of water behind the backstretch or something, and it's a long pond. But that's because it's kind of.
There was one of the races that year. My assignment was to do a story on the infield, the people in the infield, and then I wrote the story, and I was leaving, and I was driving out from the track. Well, I think it was Jeff Gordon slammed his car into the wall.
So, did you have to go back in and cover that? Because that's actually a pretty big story, right?
No, because we had people who were much better auto racing guys at the time who were able to do that, and wouldn't have let the intern touch that at all.
All right, fair enough. Joel, what's next in terms of your Colts coverage? What's the next thing that we are focused in on? I guess Combine, right?
Yeah, we got Combine coming up. We're kind of running through. Nate and I are kind of running through some free agent cases right now on the Star. But yeah, it's the Combine, and hopefully, if the credential request goes through, the Night of Champions with Peyton Manning and his merry gang of from that era.
Yeah, that is at the Murat, correct?
Correct.
And that is when? When does that take place?
February 24th.
Okay, so upcoming. All right, well, we will keep our eyes on that. Appreciate the time as always, Joel.
You bet.
Robin will get back to you on that $1 million, by the way, if you're correct on that.
If they sign Daniel Jones, I'm going to be active. It's going to be tough for me not to actively pull for him to be.
But it must be week 9. Let's keep in mind. Okay, yeah. Robin's a stickler for details, apparently. All right, appreciate it, Joel. By the way, Pocono Raceway. The one benefit when I would call races at Pocono, and it is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and you could either. If you ever are going to a race in Pocono, here's your insider tip. You can fly into Philly, but to get from Pocono back down to Philly is it's a lot of thank you, ma'am roads. I mean, it's not like one straight shot. So it's like an hour, and I think it's like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Or you can get on the interstate on 80 and go straight across to Newark, which you're going in the opposite direction, but that's like an hour and 20 minutes also, but it's straight interstate shot. So 1 year after the race, and I called the race from a billboard on the top of the backstretch. So as soon as they take the white flag, I'm basically done. And I would have my rental car parked right there and get in it and be gone and try to beat the crowd. So there was a year where I was flying. I did the Newark flight, and I've everybody knows the back half of the story because I've mentioned it. Kyle Kaiser, and it was in the year that Kaiser had bumped Fernando Alonso from the 500. Kaiser also was flying out of Newark, so he came and met me during the white flag. We got in the car. We took off. It was pouring rain. We hadn't even gotten to I-80, and we got notification that our flight was canceled. And the next flight was going to be like the next morning or something. And so I'm like, oh, man. They couldn't get us on any other flights. So I looked at him, he looked at me, and then you just, and it was like 6 o'clock in the evening probably, and then you just make a decision. You're like, you know what, there's just no, this is what we're going to have to do. And did a U-turn, stopped. I remember we stopped at a Wendy's, and Kyle Kaiser got a bowl of chili, except for that he filled the entire thing with ketchup for his French fries. I've never seen somebody eat more ketchup in my life. And he listened to, I can't remember the name of the band he listened to, but he was real into or is still, I guess, like headbanger music times 100. I don't even know what style. Do you know what style I'm talking about, Eddie? Like, and then like guys that just go, that kind of thing.
So that's like Korn and Slayer?
Like the Korn and Slayer are basically like Christian rock compared to the stuff he was listening to. I'm like, what in the world? Like, I mean, I think we went 20 miles for him. Like, yeah, we need to have a conversation here about our music selection. And then I got a speeding ticket going way too fast in the state of Ohio at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's when the cop said to me, and I quote, like, do you think you're in the Indy 500? I said, well, actually, funny you mention. But I still got the ticket for what that's worth. Pacers last night, we discussed it. All-Star break now. They play a week from tonight. But back into the conversation that we have with Tom Crean about Indiana and Purdue. Is there something when it comes to those two teams that's on the horizon that we didn't expect? We had a discussion about that just before the show today, and then I started thinking about it and did a CNC Music Factory and went, things that make you go, And I'll tell you what that is next. Right now, as it stands, because I think that we are certainly getting into the area or the territory of getting a general feel of where teams are going to end up in the NCAA tournament. I don't mean where they're going to play. I mean like their seeding and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Because conference tournaments come into play.
Bid Steeler season coming up.
I do like the bid Steelers, man. Now, typically the bid Steelers are not applicable conversation in these parts. Don't go talking about that in these parts our teams are in. But Indiana now, are they all of a sudden creeping their way back into the conversation? If you look right now at the bracketology, which admittedly is usually pretty on par, I'll tell you the team that if they get in, every year I do this. Every year I see a double-digit seed and I say that team, if they get in, is going to make noise. Or that team is a double-digit seed that is going to go to the Sweet 16. Would you like to guess, Eddie Garrison, my team this year, and you can pull up the bracketology if you need an assist here, but the team that is right around, hanging around that bubble, if they get in, they're going to be like a 10 seed, an 11 seed, whatever. But the one that, to me, if they get in, they're going to be the surprise team. They're going to be the Cinderella. They are the Sweet 16 team. They'll get beat in the Sweet 16, but they'll win 2 games and they'll make noise. And people will be like, man, it really came together for them.
I have a guess.
Go ahead.
Does the coach of this team fall on your list of candidates for the IU coaching job?
No.
Okay, so that eliminates Drake. That's who I was going to go with there.
It's a team that, I'll just tell you, because of the league they play in and the games that they've played, and the style is such that I think if they catch lightning in a bottle, they went through a tough stretch that really knocked them down within their league, but now they've kind of put it back together again. Arkansas. I think Arkansas could make some noise if they get in. But here's the question. Purdue right now is probably solidly, what would you say? What does he have him, a 2 or 3?
Let's see.
I would guess that Purdue is a 2 or 3 seed.
Well, it already has them as a 2 seed.
Yeah. Very fair. Purdue is probably no worse than a 4, unless the bottom completely falls out. But if they get in the Big Ten tournament and they get upset or whatever, they probably slide no further, probably lower than even a 3. And Purdue is benefiting from, and I give them a lot of credit for this, they go out, and Purdue went out and played really good games pre-conference and played different styles and tested themselves. Now, I realize those schedules were put out years ago. But is Indiana realistically suddenly in the conversation for if they were to beat UCLA tomorrow night? And this is after. Now, will we get on the Jumbotron there?
That's a good question.
Can we go 2 for 2 on making – because I'm going to the game tomorrow night.
Just tell Don
Fisher.
Fisher.
Return.
Just tell Don Fisher to get you guys on the
That's right.
And he'll certainly do it for Shannon.
That's right. Well, didn't he say, wait a minute, you're taking Shannon on Valentine's Day to Bloomington? She's going to be in the transfer portal by Saturday. If they beat UCLA, so Indiana has 3 quad 1 wins, right?
Currently,
they're most recently coming at Michigan State, which is a really impressive one.
Correct. They are 3-10 in quad 1, 3-0 in quad 2.
3-10?
3-0 in quad 2, 3-10 in quad 1.
You can say, oh, that's fine.
And they have 4 quad 1 games left.
I mean, that's the thing. They've got chances here to.
Is the magic number 20 wins going into the conference tournament if they go 5-1?
I think it used to be. I don't know that it is anymore. It's almost over 20, seemingly, right? It used to be that 20 was an automatic. Let me rephrase that. It used to be that 20 was an automatic. I don't know that it is anymore. But right now, I mean, Lenardi, and again, he's pretty dialed in. I mean, his thing is usually pretty on point. It gives you a very good baseline of knowledge. And he's got the first 4 out. He has the last 4 in is Georgia, San Diego State, Wake Forest, and BYU.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next 8, Arkansas, VCU, North Carolina, SMU, Pittsburgh, Xavier, UC San Diego, and Boise State. That's the next. So you're looking at Indiana is in line behind 8 teams.
Here's the thing. I look at North Carolina. They're 14-11. Indiana is 15-10. North Carolina is 7-6 in the conference. Indiana is 6-8. But North Carolina is 1-10 against quad 1 teams. They have 1 quad 1 win, and that was against Louisville.
I will go back to what I have always said. And I know that they will tell you till the cows come home that it does not factor in. And I get it. And I know that they allegedly look at blind resume and everything else. I get it. But I think the name brand helps you.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
I don't know that it does Indiana anymore, but North Carolina, yes, I think it helps them. Because first off, people want to see one of the things that is fascinating about the NCAA tournament, which is obviously, it's the greatest. It's awesome. Everything about it's awesome. But one of the things about the NCAA tournament, everybody talks about how they love it because of the underdogs and the Cinderella stories and the upsets. I mean, the upsets are awesome. People love upsets in rounds 1 and 2. After that, the television numbers will tell you that people do not like it. St. Peter's, matter of fact, if I may. Hang on. Whoops, I just ripped out my headsets. I can't hear.
Great radio.
Huh?
Great radio.
I know. I'm sorry. But what are you looking at right here, Eddie?
Something of destiny?
This, baby, is my St. Peter's, the Strut of Destiny t-shirt that Kevin Bowen bought me during St. Peter's run a few years ago. Never to be heard from again, St. Peter's, right?
Oh, they made it last year.
I know, but I mean, not like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like George Mason, when George Mason made the Final Four, and people are like, here we go, But when St. Peter's did that and went to the Final Four, the TV numbers did not indicate that people were tuned in. Like, is St. Peter's going to continue? Is George Mason going to continue? People want to see the Blue Bloods. They do. And I do believe that assists and helps a Carolina, for example, because they know also we can put them as an 11 seed or a 12 seed and send them to Spokane, and they'll sell 10,000 tickets. I go to my grave believing that's the case. But if Indiana beats UCLA tomorrow night, then yes, does that then further push them up? Do they automatically move their way into those, past 5 or 6 of those, 3 or 4 of those teams, to the point where then they're in the conversation of moving their way onto the bubble with ample opportunity to get off of it? The conversation about what it means to be on the bubble or riding the bubble or in the bubble or whatever else is a whole different talk show. We do that at another time, right? By the way, we do have a guest on the program at 2 o'clock that, speaking of kiss cams and engagements on Jumbotrons, is getting married soon, correct?
I think.
You think?
I think.
Was I not supposed to say that?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll ask him about it. How's that?
Yeah, we can do that. 20 minutes?
20 minutes from now. for what it's worth.
I mean,
Now-
you're the lover over here.
Yeah. This is interesting. Hey, Jake. For years, I've told friends, this from Grant on the Expos Twitter. For years, I've told friends, I want to do a study on why people get so excited to be on the Jumbotron. Not in a bad way, more just a fascinating human thought experiment. I've always been kind of nervous to be on the Jumbotron, right? But for whatever reason, last night at the Fuel game, I was all about it. I'm like,
I don't
let's
think
go.
I've been on the Jumbotron before.
Well, there's a headspace issue there.
Well, that's the other part of it, Jake, is with a head this big, you would think it would somehow work its way onto the Jumbotron.
No, the screen is only so big, right?
It would take up the entire screen, wouldn't it not?
Yes, it would. In fact, it would. But last night, it was fun at the Fuel game to watch the Fuel, even though they were beaten 6-2. Have you been to the Fishers Event Center?
I have not. I keep trying to find a way to get out there, but
It's nice. It's really nice. Upcoming a week from this weekend, it is the Indy Ignite Pro Volleyball Federation All-Star Game taking place on the 22nd. Tickets available at provolleyball.com, by the way. It is a really nice venue. Now, I'm curious of this. When you pull into the venue, so when you pull in, you don't, the parking, and this is 2025, I realize, okay? You don't pay to park, you pay like digitally.
Mhm.
So you park and then you go, on an app or whatever, and you pay there, and obviously it records your license plate or whatever, and if you don't pay it, then eventually you get a bill in the mail for a higher amount. But my question is this. When I pulled into, so there is a small, it's basically a street. It's in the property of the Fishers Event Center. But there's a street that has about 10 parking spots on either side of it. And at the end of that street is essentially the sign that tells you about the pay to park for the lot that you're going into. So it's a street that goes into the parking lot. Now, I parked on that street. There was a spot open. As soon as I turned it, boom, it was right there. And it's before you go into the section, the lot that is theoretically the paid lot. Now, did I get a free spot? Did I pay for a free spot? Or
Did you still pay?
yeah, better to be safe than sorry.
What you should just start doing is take your neighbor's license plate and just slap that puppy on your car.
I believe there's a legality issue that comes into play there, Eddie,
I
right?
don't think so. Not at all.
I know somebody during the 1980 Final Four that lived in my neighborhood that was a high school kid, and during the 1980 Final Four, which featured Iowa, UCLA, Louisville, and Purdue at Market Square Arena. Think about that. The Final Four was at Market Square Arena, if that tells you how things have changed. A year later, it was at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. One of the weird skills that I have, Eddie, I can tell you Final Four locations and the four teams for like all of the 80s and 90s.
Is it because of the floor?
It's a very strange – that you would think that is – I don't know why I just remember. Like, give me a year of the 80s top of your head.
87.
Well, I mean, come on, 87. It was at the New Orleans Superdome, and it was UNLV, Indiana, 97-93. Indiana defeated UNLV, and then 74-73 they defeated Syracuse. Syracuse had defeated Providence in the other semifinal.
80.
I just told you 80.
One.
Market Square Arena. 81, Spectrum, Philadelphia. You had Indiana, LSU, North Carolina, and Virginia. I think that's right, Virginia, in 81. North Carolina defeated Virginia. Indiana defeated LSU. I'm 99% certain that is correct. But at any rate, a guy in my neighborhood, a kid in my neighborhood, got arrested because he and his buddies decided that they wanted to collect license plates from as many faraway states as they could, and they went downtown to the parking garages and were stealing license plates off cars. That's very frowned upon. It might be like a federal crime, to be honest with you. I'm not certain if it is, but it feels like it.
It was Virginia.
Yeah. And then 80, it was either, I believe 81 was the final year of the consolation game. Virginia played in the consolation game. That was the final year that took place.
Do you know who they played against?
In 81?
Yep.
Yeah, LSU.
Yep.
Because LSU was defeated by Indiana.
Yep.
That was the year that Bob Knight threw the LSU fan in the trash can in the 81 Final Four. Now, the other day I happened to be watching the 87 Final Four between Indiana and UNLV, and they showed a shot of Jerry Tarkanian on the sidelines. This is staggering to me, Eddie. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
They showed Jerry Tarkanian on the sidelines, and I'm going to show you. Now, this doesn't – most of you listening can remember what Jerry Tarkanian looked like. How old is Jerry Tarkanian in this photo? This is the 1987 Final Four. Jerry Tarkanian is on the sidelines. Eddie's looking at the photo. Tarkanian looked essentially the same in 91 when Vegas came here. How old is he in that photo?
You're going to want me to guess older just by the way he appears, but I'm going to say he's like 52.
He's 56 in that photo. He is 3.5 years older in that photo than I am right now. And to me, he looks 75. But back then, like, it's just crazy. When I watch television shows and you see actors and actresses from the 70s, and, you know, if you watch Johnny Carson and they bring out somebody like a 1981 episode of Johnny Carson, and he brings out some actor and the guy sits down and immediately fires up a lung dart, and they're sitting there chatting, and you're looking at it and you're going, and I don't know if it's because, and this is a fascinating study, I guess, of the human mind. Did people look older then because of lifestyle? Everybody and their brother was smoking everywhere. You got on an airplane, it basically was just like a, you know, one big secondhand smoke tube, and et cetera, and people were living off of, you know, pot pies and TV dinners and et cetera. Was that what it was? Or do you, in your mind, because you were a kid and you were seeing it as a kid, and that's what your mind reverts back to of the perception that you had when you were like 8 and you were watching that? So in other words, if you brought out an actor in 1980 and you were 8, and I was 8 years old at the time, for example, and I'm watching it, and I think, well, that guy's really old, and he was 50. And I see it now, and I see that guy, and I go, he looks really old for 50. Does he really look really old for 50, or am I reverting back to the fact that to the initial absorption I had of it, if that makes sense what I'm saying?
You're probably reverting back to the initial absorption of it.
You think so?
Uh-huh. Because you're just going to go back and like, oh, that's how I view that back
So do
then.
I, like, to an 8-year-old kid, do I look really old? You know what I mean? Because I'm that age now. Maybe. I mean, and I'm not saying I don't, but I'm just saying, like, but I do think that lifestyle, obviously lifestyles now are healthier or more health conscious than back then. But it is amazing how everybody, in my thought, it's like, man, everybody looked old. I mean, Bob Knight, if you think about Bob Knight, like in 87 during the Final Four when he had the sweater rolled up over his stomach and his hair's white and everything else, I mean, he's 46 years old. And you look at it and you're like, gosh, when I was a kid, I felt like he was like my grandparents' age. It's all relative, I guess. It's all relative. Last night, Pacers got down 15. Eddie, what was your stat on number of times they've been down by 15?
6 consecutive games.
Absolutely has to buck that trend, don't they?
You would think.
And I don't mean they have to, like, man, they've got to find their way out of that. I mean, like, eventually that's going to happen. The law of averages says that turns, one would think, right?
Well, in large part because they're struggling to knock down threes at a high clip. I mean, they're barely cracking 30% some nights.
There is something to me about the Pacers that has become more obvious than ever. And while it is great that it's an obvious thing and an obvious answer for Indiana, it's also a challenge because I think it might be presenting for them a big-time predicament moving forward. And I'm not talking about coming back from 15 down. And I'm not talking about figuring out whether or not how they put Neesmith in the lineup starting versus Matherin or Matherin versus Neesmith. It's none of those things. But there's one thing that I think could be, right now, it's a good thing that they're seeing it, but it might be a challenge for them. And I'm going to present that to Tony East and get his thoughts on whether or not it's a predicament for the Pacers and tell you what it is next. Okay, so here's my question when it comes to the Indiana Pacers is this. The real winner here heading into the All-Star break may be Myles Turner. Because as we bring on Tony East, who knows as much about contracts and things like that as anybody that covers the Pacers, and, of course, as part of Locked On Pacers, he writes for Forbes, he writes for THR, a number of different areas, and, of course, you hear him a lot on this program. Tony, as Myles Turner has been out here heading into the All-Star break, and you could see between the Karl Anthony Towns performance, nothing against Thomas Bryant, but it is, to me, very much illuminated how important Turner's defense and how he is the straw that kind of at times mixes the drink of the style the Pacers want to play, and they struggle when he is not on the floor. Is his free agency price with Indiana increasing with each game that he misses?
Yeah, it's helping his case, right? And, Thomas Bryant has played some of his not best basketball with the Pacers during this stretch, which has not helped, although he was quite good last night in D.C., but for him, for Turner, like, this has illuminated why he's so valuable. It's not necessarily only this. Like, he's clearly good, but the value he brings is that he makes it easier for Halliburton and Siakam to be the best version of themselves, right? Siakam has talked about how Turner's fit as part of why he wanted to come here in the first place, and Halliburton and Turner have such an efficient pick-and-roll or pick-and-pop partnership, right? So it's not even just about the, 17 points and however many rebounds and the defense Turner provides. And he did play the best defense he's played in, I would say, a year or two last month. It's about all that, too. It's about how he makes everybody else better. It's about how important he is to their scheme on both ends. And so I think everybody kind of knew that, or at least I did. But you've really seen it illuminated in this stretch where all of a sudden they're just playing awful and they're searching for answers at the 5 and they're not shooting as well. They're giving up a bunch of easy baskets at the rim all night to some not great rim finishing teams. And if you're Turner, you're saying, hey, see, right after they kept me in the trade deadline, this is exactly why they should be keeping me. So, yeah, it's certainly been illuminating for him and the team about how important he is. And I think it's been known because he's good, but now it's really known just like what kind of value making everybody else better really has.
For that matter, is it possible that Isaiah Jackson, even coming off of injury and the question marks that are going to come with coming off the Achilles, and you feel bad for Jackson because he's entering free agency as well, or he's in the last year of his deal, does his price tag go up because of the fact they're going to have to get something there, in particular with rim protection, if they can't retain Turner?
Yeah, and they're going to need a third big, right? Like, the topping at the 5 can help, and against certain teams, the Wizards aren't very good. They got away with it there. But it did not work against the Lakers. It was mediocre against the Jazz. It didn't work against the Blazers. Like, it's not always a panacea, and so you needed that third big. That's why they got Jahlil Okafor with a 10-day, and keeping Jackson in to have Bryant, Jackson, and Turner would be great, and especially with games Turner's missed, you could have better defensive presence. You could have some vertical spacing. They liked Isaiah Jackson. He played very well for them in the playoffs last year. Like, there's a reason they would want to keep him around. So potentially with him, it's really hard. They played the Wizards last night, which is very fitting because a guy who had a similar situation heading into restricted free agency as a good player is on the Wizards, in Saddiq Bey, who was going to want a lot of money, probably almost $20 million a year. He's a wing who can shoot. He tore his ACL. He signed for $18 million over 3 years in the summer, right? Like, coming off of big injuries in restricted free agency, you're just not going to get that much money. So Jackson is potentially needed by the Pacers, but his situation could actually work in their favor as they try to juggle the tax and sort out their center position, because they actually could end up finding a way to be able to keep him at a reasonable price because they might need him, as this week has also exposed, like you're saying.
By the way, Tony, I can't tell you how much, and the answer is a lot. It kind of excites me to have the word panacea used on this radio show. A panacea.
Look it up? Did you know it already?
Yeah, panacea is something, and I think typically it means in the medical sense, but panacea, if I'm not mistaken, means basically a one-time cure, right? Like a cure-all for anything, right?
Yes.
Like that Arm & Hammer baking soda. That's a panacea, isn't it? Like, it works on everything, right?
I'm not versed enough in baking to answer that, but I will trust your.
I don't think
years of
anybody
life
bakes
knowledge.
with it. I think you put it in kitty litter, and then you open a box of it, and you set it on your shelf, and it absorbs, and then in the freezer.
Oh, is it to like make your fridge smell better and stuff?
Yeah.
One of those kind of deals.
Why is nobody just putting that in their pits? You know what I mean? Like, but I do think they
Why
make
am I
a
buying
deodorant.
I could just put baking soda on.
That's right. I think they make a deodorant. Actually, they make toothpaste, the whole deal. It's incredible, right? But anyway, back to the issue at hand. Okay, Nesmith, Mathurin. Which one do you think long term is the better fit as a starter, and which one is the better fit coming off a bench?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've made the case this year that I would keep starting Mathurin if I had any sort of say in the matter, which I obviously don't, because of how good that starting group has been this season with him in there, and continued to be the case for a while. But the last month that's kind of faltered. But the reason I would have stuck with it is just that, he's young, and they're trying to find the right balance of what their current situation is, what their current outlook is, and what they're going to. I'm trying to get as many reps of Mathurin with other guys as possible. If I'm the Pacers, and with other guys, I mean Halliburton and Siakam in particular. So I would have kept starting him because that starting group was working so well. But in the last month, it had it, right? They'd only been better than +2, that starting five, one time in the last month of time. And Nesmith's just a very safe, comfortable choice. It lets Halliburton and Siakam have the ball more. It, in theory, raises their defense, although it has not at all this month. The difference is with the bench, as we've seen these last couple of games, Mathurin can have the ball more and do the things that make him such a special player. He's fully taken advantage of that, and especially as McConnell struggles, I think that has really helped the Pacers' second unit add a little juice. So I think for the long term of the team, Mathurin is probably the right starting answer, and even at times this year, the short term. But I get why they went back to Nesmith, and it's just kind of a tricky balance of maximizing every player. It's not a puzzle that I would want to have to figure out as Rick Carlisle, because there is really no good answer. What do you think, Jake?
Here's the thing. When you look at both of them, to me, it's more important about where a guy finishes a game than starts a game. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And Mathurin has closed, I believe, both games since then.
Correct. And so to me, I don't know how to word this. This is a complicated answer. Mathurin to me is the guy that can he can be effective for you in either situation, whereas Nesmith, I think, there is such a disparity. He is a much better as a starter in the way that he contributes because of his defense than if you bring him off the bench. So because Mathurin can kind of go either way, I default to Mathurin, then for me comes off the bench. And also because I want to have him on the floor at the end of the game, because Mathurin does have, Eddie and I talked about this earlier, Mathurin is one guy that has a get-out-of-my-way mentality late in games.
Yes.
And I like that. Right now, that's not to say that you can't be on the floor at the end of the game if you're starting or coming off the bench or whatever it may be. But to me, it's more so about what is going to keep a guy freshest at the end of the game or keep him in tune at the end of the game. And I'm not worried about where they start as much as I am about where they finish. Now, I think Nesmith is –
I agree.
And Mathurin's defense has improved. And I think he was tested with that, Tony. I think Rick Carlisle challenged him in that regard when his minutes declined a little bit. But I'll give him credit. He has answered to that. I guess the other part of the question, which you may know, is do you believe that either of those two guys has a problem with whichever way it goes?
Yeah, that to me was – you just said two things that were also a part of my thinking for a while. Part of why I thought Mathurin would make sense to keep starting even when Nesmith was healthy and the team was up to full speed again was that his defense was better. And that was like part of what they have had to ask him to do do what we've talked about since they picked him, which is blend what he is and what makes him special at his age with what the Pacers need him to be the best possible version of the team with the roster they have. And part of that was defense, and he's been better at it this year, certainly. The starting lineup with him out there has a very good defensive rating. I would say it's inconsistent still. There are some games it doesn't feel like it's there. They played the Knicks earlier this week. His offense was good that night. His defense was all over the place. Sorry, my windshield wipers just made an awful noise. So I think that was part of it. And, yeah, certainly the attitude part matters. I'm not going to pretend to speak for them. That would not be wrong of me. But I think it'd be fair to say that if one of them was going to react very poorly to being benched and the other one was not, then the one that would react poorly would be the one that you start. Clearly, I think that the fact that they made a switch means that that is not the case. But if it is a source of pride for one of them, then just keep that one starting, right? It's not worth ruffling feathers over that. So I truly think for them, it came down to their last month of that starting five not playing so well, and they had some dreadful starts on this road trip, granted without Myles Turner, and they know that the Neesmith group works. It worked in the playoffs last year. Like, that is kind of a trump card over anything they do. And if it means Matherin can be better and still close games, and maybe if it matters to him, like to fire under him in some way, then great. And if it's just to maximize the team they have, great. But I think this will be a discussion for a while because Matherin has made key strides in areas of stuff that they've asked him to do to be that kind of starter level fit with Halliburton, Siakam guy.
Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned the windshield wipers. Are we into the freezing rain yet, Tony, or are we out of the woods on that? What can you give us an update on the roads?
The very slippery sidewalk at the place I'm currently at suggests that, no, it's still going to be freezing rain-ish. Nothing is falling right now, but it is not awesome. Don't drive unless you have to.
Okay, fair enough.
And I don't have to, so I'm not taking my own advice right now.
Okay, so if the word there is take it easy, in terms of the Pacers roster during the All-Star break, give me the players not named Myles Turner that are most in need of simply taking it easy. And by that, I mean they're maybe not 100%.
Can I just say Tyrese Halliburton like 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row and call that? I mean, like, and I don't even mean that to say that I think that his season he's been hurt or that he like is overused or anything. But I mean, when was his last like true break, right? Like last season they played till late May, and he before the season started he played in the World Cup, which is like in September. So he basically went from off-season training into the World Cup into a season, rehab, rest of season, playoffs, rehab, Olympics, rehab. Like he had no break ever because he's always dealing with the hamstring or playing games and very important games for Team USA for like a year and a half straight. And so for him specifically, like it was a similar deal with Caitlin Clark last year for the Fever. Like post All-Star, not playing was good for her physically and mentally. And I think that could be good for Halliburton. Just get away for a little bit. Get away from the game. You know, I think that will be important for him because he hasn't had that kind of gap in a long time where he's not rehabbing anything specifically. He's not playing in a very major important season for whatever basketball, thing he's a part of at the time. He is obviously top of the list. Turner is an important one because of the neck injury. It sounds like he'll be back when they get back from the break. But, that we talked about at the top, how much they missed him, like him getting right is going to be important. My subtle answer would be, what's Jahlil Okafor's All-Star break going to look like? And he just grind in the gym like 20 hours a day to try to keep his spot on the team. I think that'll be an interesting.
Do you remember,
All-Star
Tony?
break for him.
Do you remember me asking you, like, at the very beginning of the season, I was like, wait a minute, what's the deal with Okafor? Like, why are they not giving him a look? I think it was when Isaiah Jackson got hurt. And
yeah, and it was very clear early with the Mad Ants that he was still trying to, like, fully get his mobility back. He said it took him a year and a half to recover from his Achilles tear, like fully, like to feel like himself on the floor. But he's added some big man skills or modern skills. He's passing and shooting some threes. But you were right on it. He's back in the. What a cool story that is, huh?
It is. But here's the thing: do you believe that he gets a second 10-day contract at any point this year?
It is only possible because of the timing. Like his current 10-day would end on February 20th, and the buyout market doesn't usually materialize until March 1st. So it's possible he gets a second one on the 21st, but I don't think he'll stick and be their third center come playoff time unless he does something incredible in one of these games on the 10-day. And look, it's great that he made it back, and a lot of guys want to go out on their own terms. Like fighting back for 4 years is much better than just the game passes you by. So it would be great for him, but. Yeah, I don't. A second 10-day is a possibility, but I don't expect him to get a standard deal for the rest of the season.
Tony, when you look, let's go back to Tyrese Halliburton. Tony East is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. When you go back to Tyrese Halliburton and when he was, prime Tyrese Halliburton, he was hitting threes.
Is it over already?
Well, I don't mean it that way. I'm saying, let me rephrase that. I don't mean like in his prime. I mean when he was at his pinnacle of what he was doing that was wowing league-wide, right? And,
yes. Yeah.
Hitting threes from anywhere and seemingly whenever he wanted. He was literally like in the NBA Jam zone for 2 to 3 months last year around the time of the in-season tournament. So But it seems to me like now that his three-point shot has not been as consistent, that defenses are playing off of him, and it's getting harder for him to penetrate and get around people because they're playing off of him. Or is it more so that he just has lost that first step burst because of the injury and the hamstring or the groin or whatever it was, and it's never gotten back to 100%?
Yeah, it's some of both. Like, I actually think that he will settle back into being a 40% three-point shooter, both because I think he's been about that since the first 15 games this season, and because we have 3.5 years of evidence that that's the level of jump shooter that he is. And he just made 4 of 9 last night. Like, it was the only thing going for him was that three-point shot. And so some guys are still playing up on him, and he has that little 3-step that my dad and everybody thinks is a travel step back that he can get to still. But yeah, I think it's more so the second one where he's just lost some of the first step burst that he had when he was at that apex you're describing. And it's some of it in tandem, right? Like, when he can get back behind the line really quick and then suddenly shift back towards going to the rim and get by guys. And, he was doing that, like, weird hook shot thing all the time back then, and it was going in and up, and his floater was a little more deadly. Like, I still think his signature shot of his career is that floater he hit against the Bucks. Like, he hasn't been able to get to that as much this season. Like, it's kind of all that in tandem where he can't get by guys as easily, and the three isn't as much of a weapon. The thing that strikes me the most in terms of his inside the arc effectiveness and his ability to shift games with more than just his three is, it feels like to me he's getting off the ball quicker in the lane, like at the elbow, or where he has room to take another dribble or even look at that floater that was so good for him at times last year, where he's not even looking to take it or looking to get to the rim. He's trying to get it out to a corner shooter or reset the play to get someone else going on a drive. And look, there's something noble about being a pass-first point guard and trying to get all your teammates involved in those situations where you feel like you've created an advantage. But Tyrese Halliburton's really good. Like, he should be the guy capitalizing on those advantages a lot of the times. And that's what I kind of feel like I've seen a shift from him, whether that's because he doesn't want to take that extra dribble into the teeth, whether it's because he feels like the floaters escaped him, he doesn't have the lift on that shot. I mean, I'm totally guessing. Like, he doesn't seem like somebody who said that these are things he can't do anymore. But that's where I feel like I see the most difference in what he used to be able to do versus what he actually does now.
Tony, we're going to play a little NBA fact or fiction, okay? I'm going to make a statement.
Okay.
You tell me if it's fact or fiction. You ready?
Yep, got it.
Okay. The Pacers, who currently sit going into the All-Star break at 5.5 games behind the New York Knicks, are in the 4th position in the East. They have reached the summit of where they will actually be able to get in terms of playoff seeding.
I think that's fact this year. I think I probably would have said facts before this week, but losing to the Knicks specifically on Tuesday probably was the grave for any chance at 3. I don't think they could have caught Boston or Cleveland anyway, but now they're, like you said, 5.5 behind. That's a lot to catch up in only 27 more games, 26. And they don't have the tiebreaker, so it's really 6.5. I mean, that is a tall task. And look, there's always the chance that half the Knicks roster's knees explode at the same time because they all play 40 minutes every night. But I think 4 is probably as high as they can get this year. And Milwaukee's not playing great. Detroit's playing all right. But it's very possible they settle into 4. I think that the Central Division chase for 4, 5, 6 will be more the story and not necessarily the Pacers' ability to get up to 3.
Okay, Cleveland's 44-10 record is actually at this point a little bit misleading because they got off to such a torrid start that they are not necessarily still the dominant best team in the East. And Boston and New York would like something to say about that. Fact or fiction?
I think Boston's better than them, and I think Boston will be better than them in a playoff setting. But I think they're real. I think they're really good. They got DeAndre Hunter and added to their team. The only reason I say fiction to that is because I don't think they have a bad loss. Like, I think they lost to the Hawks once, and then all the rest of their losses are like Boston, New York, OKC, Indiana, like good, really good teams. And of course, in the playoffs, they're going to have to beat those teams if they want to be truly like a 44-10 level team that can make the conference finals or the finals. But they're really good. They have 3 All-Stars for a reason. I think Jared Allen had a shot at that last spot if they had one more injury replacement. But I think they're really good. And the only teams that can truly dismantle them are also very good teams that are among the best in their own conference.
The biggest disappointment so far in this NBA season has been the Minnesota Timberwolves. Fact or fiction?
Well, They have been disappointing, but I actually was prepping for you to say Philadelphia 76ers in the question. So fiction, it's the Sixers, and I don't even – I mean, can everything possible go wrong for a franchise so bad as it has in Philly? They're tied with the Nets for 12th in the East, 12th place. They just gave Joel Embiid a max extension and Paul George a max contract. Both of those already look like bad contracts. They're screwed. I mean, they have like a hope that they can have a resurgent near next year, but like it's going to be really hard for them to add any sort of talent to this group, and they can't even be better than the Brooklyn Nets. Paul George last night was their lone star when they played Brooklyn. They needed him to be good to beat a tanking Nets team. He had 2 points on 1 for 7 shooting, and they lose. They scored 96 points. What? They are by far, I think, the biggest disappointment to me. Minnesota's certainly up there. They had such a great identity last year. They had Karl Towns that made the conference finals. Now their defense isn't as good. They don't have Karl Towns. They didn't make a single trade deadline move. Ant has been, I guess, better because he can shoot, but they're not nearly as effective or threatening as last year without that top-flight defense. Very disappointing and very unfun for a fan base that just saw the best season for that team since they had Kevin Garnett. But I think Minnesota fans are happy. They got their new owners. They still have Anthony Edwards. The Sixers are screwed. I say fiction. It's Philly. Yeehaw.
Okay, barring injury, we're assuming that all teams stay healthy here. Oklahoma City is hands down the best in the West, and no one touches them.
Fact, yes. I think I saw this yesterday. I have not verified this myself, so forgive me if someone looks this up and I'm wrong. I believe they currently have the best net rating in NBA history, like best team ever in the regular season levels of stuff. Their defense is like way better than anybody else, and Shea is probably the MVP. I don't know. Him and Jokic have both been amazing.
He's very good.
Yeah, he's sensationally good. They're awesome. Their team just makes so much sense, and they have, I think, played like 3 or 4 total games with both Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren healthy. Like, it's very possible that they have another gear to hit. They might be my title favorites right now. I still think they need some shooting at some point, and they didn't get any at the trade deadline. But, yeah, I think they're the clear-cut best team in the West, and maybe the NBA pending a Boston resurgence.
Okay, the team that is the biggest threat to Oak City in the West is Los Angeles, talking about the Lakers, once Luka and LeBron have meshed.
Yeah, that is very possible. They looked pretty good in their first game, but they also got smoked by the Jazz last night. So I don't know how to feel about the Lakers yet. It's very early in the experiment that they have. If they had Mark Williams, maybe. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, they're going to be good. Luka's amazing. Like, he dragged a not great. They were pretty good. He dragged a pretty good Mavs team to the finals last year, right? So I think it's them or Denver probably. I mean, and that's mostly because Luka and Jokic are two of the best 5'3" players on the planet, and that's typically what it takes to derail OKC is have a better player. Last year, Ant was amazing, and Luka was amazing in the playoffs, and Luka was better than Shea, and the Mavs won that series. So if Luka plays amazing for the Lakers, it's very possible that they could be the biggest threat to OKC, but I think it's Denver. I mean, Jokic is just he's averaging a triple-double and making like 48% of his threes. It's unbelievable how good he's been.
Okay, lastly, your euphemism about the Jazz and the way that they beat the Lakers last night is the only time anybody references anything having to do with smoking in the state of Utah.
That's probably a fact, yes.
No caffeine either, right? Have you been to Salt Lake City, by the way?
I've been to Utah to ski. I didn't go to Salt Lake City, though.
I hear it's beautiful, right? Absolutely. I've been to southern Utah, but not like around Salt Lake City. But my understanding is that the whole state is beautiful.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it, like surrounded by mountains and stuff. All the NBA people who went there for All-Star a couple years ago, and it was freezing cold. So I don't think the NBA had a good time there. What is that trend for the NBA? They go to a fun city, and then it's just snowy and cold, and everybody hates it?
Man, how weird was that? You remember that last year? Like literally no one, if I remember when the All-Star game was here last year, on that Friday, no one predicted, and all of a sudden, boom, at like 4 p.m, there was a snowstorm.
It was funny because Thursday they had all that stuff for like local media, right? So I got to go see that like LED court and see some of the stuff at the convention center, and it was like 40 and perfectly clear and sunny outside. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm going to walk around all weekend. This is going to be fun. And then all the other people show up from out of town, and it just dumps snow everywhere for a whole day.
It was
freezing and windy. It was rough.
Tony, how's Winchester doing?
Oh, man. He is still a menace. He is growing. He eats my shoestrings all the time, and it's quite fun being a cat owner again, but he is a little nuts.
How old is Winchester?
His name is Winston, and he is 3 months old. He is 3 months old now. So
I don't know why I
he's
thought
learning
it was
about the world.
True or false? Nobody in Utah has ever named their cat Winston because no one smokes. Also true,
Is
right?
Winston a bad cat? Is Winston a bad smoky cat name?
No, it's actually a cool cat name.
Wait,
But
he's a smoky cat?
True or false? No cat in Utah has ever had catnip. Also
that
true.
Would be that's their version of smoking. I've heard that it's their version of drugs, right? I don't know that.
No, man. Listen. All kidding aside, my understanding is that Utah is absolutely. That Salt Lake City is very, very cool, and Utah is very, very cool as well. All right, Tony.
You're turning into Vernon Maxwell with these random pot shots at Utah.
That's
so
right. I have nothing against Utah. Tony, enjoy the All-Star break. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Will do.
Tony East and Winston joining us, Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. When I was a younger guy, and one of the things about being a sportscaster that just stuck with me, I don't know. I always remember from the time that I could really even grasp what I wanted to do for a living, which is probably around second or third grade when I really decided that, I wanted to be a sportscaster. And my initial goal was always to be like the 11 o'clock local news sports director. Ed Sorensen was the guy that I watched every night, and although he came here when I was in the sixth grade, but you get my point. And I just knew that I was probably going to have to just move somewhere because you didn't know where jobs were available. And when I was a kid, had this grand vision that I wanted to live in Salt Lake City. And part of it, and I still can envision in my mind that the house that I had created in my mind, I wanted to live in this big house on Salt Lake. I thought that Salt Lake was like Geist and that people lived all around it. I had no idea, and I think people know this now, obviously, that it is basically just it's a salt flat, essentially, and no one's within like 20 miles of it. I flew over it once, and it was fascinating to look down on, but my understanding is it stinks too because of all the salt there. And it's not, Salt Lake City is not like right on the lake. But at any rate, people I know that have been to Salt Lake City say it is super cool. Have you been there, Eddie?
I have not, but Mark Boyle says it's one of his favorite NBA cities.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely beautiful aesthetically.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it would be super, super cool. No question about it. Absolutely no question about it.
How soon in your life did you realize you wanted to be a cemetery
aficionado?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Listen, I love history. So it's probably, you know what? I can actually answer that moment when my life changed, when the epiphany changed. I'll tell you that, and then I want to recap something interesting Tom Crean had to say to us earlier. We'll do that next. Easy answer for you, Eddie, is this. When I was in the 8th grade, my family took a family vacation to Kiowa Island in South Carolina, and during that trip, we were down in Charleston, and we were just at an old church. My dad wanted to see the grave of John Calhoun, the former vice president of the United States, who, by the way, John Calhoun was also involved in the founding of Clemson University, for what that's worth, in the land that the university went towards and et cetera. But that's not why we wanted to see the grave. But my dad liked history a lot, so we went to this old cemetery that had graves from the 18th and 19th century, which when you're in the 8th grade, I mean, that alone was fascinating. And one of the above-ground graves, the side marble on it had broken, and you could kind of see down into the vault. You couldn't see the grave, but you could see down into it, and it fascinated me. Just the history of, how many people had come to that particular site and seen it, and how long, and the contributions to society that the people that were entombed there were. And so that began my fascination with the backstories of people and their contributions in history itself. So that probably is your answer on why then cemetery that led me to going to cemeteries to see people's resting place, for what that's worth. But I love history. And earlier on this program, we had Tom Crean on. I wanted to replay this for you folks that missed it earlier today. We had a very long conversation. It'll all be up in totality on the podcast center coming up as soon as we're done with the show here, or shortly thereafter. But one of the things that I asked Tom Crean, in addition to talking about Purdue and Braden Smith and Thomas Bryant and the NBA and college basketball and today and NIL, it was a fascinating conversation. But obviously we know the situation with Indiana. Mike Woodson is out. Tom Crean is somebody who has coached at Indiana, who lost a job at Indiana. And I asked him about his overall assessment of the situation right now with Indiana basketball.
It's hard. I mean, there's no doubt. I didn't see the game the other night against Michigan State because I was working, but the job is you got to wear a lot of hats in that job. I mean, you just have to, and it's always harder for me if I haven't seen anybody practice, because I really hate the judgments if I haven't seen them practice. And I've never seen Mike's teams practice, so I don't have that assessment. I care about people back there that I worked with, like Jordan Halls, Calbert, Cheney, Tim Carl, Dr. Rink, people like that. But I don't ask them about the team. Like, I might send an encouraging note or text, but I don't ask them about that. When I watch them play from the analyst view, their guard play is so inconsistent. And you got a lot of guys that have some talent, but it's just been hard to get that group to mesh together. And there's times the passing can be up for grabs, which leads to poor shooting. The decision-making can be up for grabs, which leads to turnovers and forced shots. No matter where you coach, you want an identity. And you want that identity. It's like kind of the question you asked about the teams that can adjust to certain things. That identity's got to be able to travel with you. It's got to be able to be at home. It's got to be able to come back down 8 with 4 minutes to go, down 6, 2 minutes to go. It's got to be able to do that. And there's got to be a belief in one another and how you make each other better. And to me, it's just there's too many fundamental things when you see some of the passes, some of the decisions, what happens if a play breaks down, that just haven't been close to consistent enough to win against other really good teams on a consistent level. And that just becomes a part of a whole. That's not a judgment on Mike. That's not a judgment on the staff. And it's really not a judgment on the team. It's just kind of what it is. And those are the things to me that are really, really tough.
When you look at the fact,
the board, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you look at the fact now that, and I mean this is, and I'm not trying to put you in a position to say anything disrespectful to Archie Miller, Mike Woodson, but they are now in their third coaching search since you left, and in addition to that, we have human nature, right? And your name has come up a lot amongst Indiana fans now of, gosh, maybe we did have it better than we realized in the moment, right, at the end of your tenure there. Do you feel vindicated?
No, I don't like that. I still feel bad, right? Like, I feel bad that it ended when it did. I mean, I do think we had people, and the administration's different. So I'm not saying about this current administration. it's almost like those Big Ten championships, those are really, really, really hard to get. Like that grind of the season is a bear, no matter what league you're in. Getting to Sweet 16s, overcoming adversity, overcoming injuries. And at the end of the day, really, we couldn't overcome the injuries. The one that killed us visibly was the fact we lost OG Anunoby, who was a lottery pick at the time, and had 18 games. He missed 18 games. But the one that killed us, that people didn't see as much, was losing Colin Hartman, our only senior, right? Because he was such a conduit to what we did. We can go back to his sophomore year. We don't beat Maryland at home one night if Colin's not at the 5 drilling threes on their 5-man that can't come out. So we just didn't have – I knew it, and I really knew it after that last Big Ten championship in Sweet 16, that the support wasn't there. And you can tell it, and that I chose to stay with it. I chose to be there because I believed in those kids, and I knew that Thomas Bryant stayed a lot because of me. I knew that OG was not ready to leave yet, and we had guys back, and it is what it is. But vindication, no. Confident that we were doing a lot of really good things, yes. And but none of it was a real surprise. And it didn't just start when we got let go. It really started years earlier. And that's the kind of stuff that's hard. So you never, I don't live in woe is me world on that, but you live with that, right? And I feel for the coaches that are in there. I felt for Kevin Wilson. I felt for Tom Allen. I don't even know Tom Allen. I don't know Kurt Zignetti, but coaching is really, really hard. And these coaches that come out, we're getting threats, and they're saying this, man, live our life. We dealt with the same thing there. I mean, it's part of life.
Would you go back?
That's a hypothetical that I'm not touching, because that's kind of been there, done that type of thing. I don't see that in the cards. I really don't. So I don't really think in that terms of that. But we loved it there. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of what it takes to be a good coach there in my mind. And because the fans don't want a CEO now. They want somebody grassroots that they can touch, that they can feel a part of and connected to, and that makes them feel a total part of it. We never get that program back without that type of mentality and building it up, because they didn't just show up because it was Indiana. I mean, there had to be a real feel of a connection to it. And that's why I'm so proud of the way it all came back, because it doesn't come back without the fans. But you had to make sure the fans knew that they were absolutely needed from day one.
Tom Crean earlier today on this show, again, on the Podcast Center on 93.5, on 107.5thefan.com. The full interview will be up. But he was very good earlier. Second time we've had him on the show, and I did not, when he was coaching at Indiana, I was, like a lot, probably a vocal critic of Tom Crean in terms of the coaching aspect of it, or the way in which he ran towards the end Indiana basketball. But man, he's been great, and he's really good as an analyst right there. I mean, he offers really good insight as to the game itself. And I thought one of the things that was interesting was when he explained how being away from it, the things that he's learned about coaching that he didn't know as a coach. I think we're always learning with different aspects and different things. Speaking of learning, one guy in the NFL is learning something that I don't know he's ever had to learn before, which is something considering he's one of the all-time greats. We'll get into that, and we'll hand it off to John coming up in about 20 here on The Fan. Sports are a funny thing, man. And it's true in all walks of life. You never know when your business makes a change, or you could be let go, laid off. I mean, it happens in all walks of life. In pro sports, you are heavily compensated. Don't get me wrong. And so I think that we just naturally think like, oh man, players make $20 million a year, so they don't worry about where they're playing or who they're playing for or whatever else. You kind of see both sides of that right now in what's happening in the world of sports, because we'll begin with Dalton Connect, who I realize, Jake, Dalton Connect, you're talking about the dude that like played for Tennessee and like fell in the draft a little bit and was at the Lakers. Like, who cares? Well, he found himself in an interesting situation because he was a part of the Lakers trade with Charlotte that was supposed to bring Mark Williams to the Lakers, and then Williams in Los Angeles failed the physical. Is failed the physical the wrong wording? I don't know. But the Lakers found something on it apparently that they did not want to clear, right?
They found multiple things apparently.
Have they said what it is?
Mm-mm. He's been dealing with ankle and back injuries this season, so.
Well, hell, I've been dealing with that for 10 years.
Well, I mean, he's like 22.
I know, I'm kidding.
You're like 54.
I'm kidding, right? But 52, don't sell me short here. Or overshoot me.
Sorry, you're getting more gray. I couldn't tell.
I am, man. Here's the key, guys.
Is that what it does working with me?
No.
Okay, I'm glad.
Here's the thing. When you get a little gray in the temples, and I'm looking at the camera for the YouTube audience, if you keep your hair really short, you can't tell that it's gray. The longer it gets, the more the gray comes out. So you trim the sides, and then people are like, oh, he's not really gray. But it's definitely peppering a little more up top.
So did I just
Would you
tell
rather
you that
be
you
gray
need to
or
get
bald?
Ooh, that's a good question. Bald. Does that feel like if I went gray, people are going to assume I'm older, and if I go bald, I think
thinking about shaving my
younger.
head again. But Shannon said no. I said, yeah, I'm going to shave my head, and she said, I like your hair, which I think is her way of saying, don't you dare. But anyway, Dalton Connect is learning about, because now he's got.
We should do it together. I threatened that too. Olivia said the same thing. Please no.
My gosh, can you imagine, Eddie, with the size of your head, if you shave your head, you'll lose 12 pounds.
I used to have a buzz cut growing up.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful, I mean, because it's just so fast, right? It's so easy to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton Connect is basically saying, like, look, it's like a dream. It's like, how do I go back now to the Lakers, who I feel like turned their back on me? And I get that. That would be tough, right?
Yeah, sorry. Somebody who's listening to the show texted me and said, yeah, that's why I'm bald.
Yeah.
So it's not gray.
That's right. But the real person that I was thinking about when I was just thinking of pro sports and learning with, while the wheels keep turning in sports, and I'm sure that someone could go back and look at the way that things ended in Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers and say that Green Bay was the one that facilitated that. But Rodgers is a guy that came into the league, and if you recall, he was a Bay Area guy, played at Cal. The Niners needed a quarterback, and they passed on him. And instead, Rodgers fell and was drafted by the Packers, and that was the famous quote. It is a great quote when they said, like, how mad are you or how upset are you that San Francisco did not select you? And he said, not near as upset as they're going to be that they didn't select me, which is a great quote. And a lot of guys say that kind of thing, and you never hear from him again. And in his case, he obviously became one of the greats ever to play it. But today, and I thought it was interesting, we knew that the Jets were moving on with Aaron Glenn and just the direction and the change with the Jets. We knew they were moving on. But for the Jets to come out and issue a statement of, hey, best of luck to Aaron Rodgers. Thanks for your 2 years. Best of luck, and the video and all that. In the career of Aaron Rodgers as an athlete, for a guy that, and I don't know Aaron Rodgers, but by all account, he is essentially estranged from his family, and he, what was it like? He never talks to his brother, or his brother said he doesn't talk to anybody. And how many times has he been in like these serious relationships? Didn't he announce once that he was engaged, and then he never ended up getting married? Obviously, Danica Patrick, we know that relationship, they were together a while. That broke up. Is this the first time that Aaron Rodgers, since the San Francisco 49ers didn't snub him but didn't select him, is this the first time as a pro that he has dealt with not being wanted back? Is it the first time that Aaron Rodgers, who definitely has a level of narcissism about him, you have to play that position, I get that, but seemingly, I think with every situation that he goes into, he has been the one controlling the shots and controlling the fate and setting the narrative and setting the tone. And now all of a sudden, he finds himself in a position not only that a franchise, and one of the floundering franchises for that matter, I mean, it's not like the Kansas City Chiefs, decided to part ways with a receiver. I mean, the New York Jets, for crying, like what's the Jets' alternative at quarterback?
I think it's the second time that this has happened to him in his career. I think towards the latter year and a half with Green Bay, you kind of got that sense when they traded away Devontae Adams.
But a lot of that was facilitated by him, right?
I don't think he wanted his best friend traded, but they went ahead and got rid of him to Vegas, and the next thing you know, that Rodgers wants to trade the next season after his best friend's gone.
But he just, but that was when he was like, hey, I'm going to decide whether or not I want to come back. And he's done that a couple of times. And like, what do you mean decide whether you're going to come back? Like, you're under contract.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm going to decide in the next couple of days, I'll let you know where I'm going to play next year. And I'm like, where are you going to play next year? You're under contract. Now, the other question becomes, and one would think the Raiders are probably a possibility, but does this now start to feel like Brett Favre as a Viking, or Joe Namath as a Charger, or Johnny Unitas as a Charger, Joe Namath as a Ram,
Montana as a Chief?
Yeah, but he had some good, yes, for the most part. Franco Harris as a Seahawk. Is that what we're going to get into here? Is he going to go somewhere and basically just ride out the last year or two, or does he still have it within him to go somewhere and be a final piece?
Wonder if he's going to go somewhere where he can get his ayahuasca.
That's probably what he's doing right now. He's like in a cave for the next month or something like that. J&V has walked in and arrived. John, what's on the big program today?
Did you say final piece? Did I hear that?
That's right. Where's Rodgers end up?
Oh, here,
or better
right?
yet, does anybody
here with
care,
the Colts, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Who's going to talk to Chris Ballard at the Combine? Is that the first thing you're going to ask, is when Aaron Rodgers will be here?
Daniel Jones will probably be here, right? We talked to Joel A. earlier.
We're going to
his
do
prediction.
Mr. Jones and me.
That's a good song, by the way.
Just threw an interception.
If Daniel Matt Hiblin, who we work with at the beginning of the year, said when Daniel Jones got released by the Giants, he goes, I can see it now. The Colts are going to sign him as a backup. Richardson's going to get hurt, and Daniel Jones is going to finish the year with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Then you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to continue down the path with him like you have. I mean, this is just the treadmill that we're on right now.
Total. What's on the big show today other than the treadmill?
We have DePurak. We'll talk about the Pacers. I was about ready to get pissed last night, man.
Boy, can you imagine?
Luckily, I'm not. What else we got? Ned and Rip. Some conference changes going on. A little bit of high school stuff with Kyle. We've got Rob Blackman, Boilermaker Radio Network, Mike Chappell. We'll talk about when Aaron Rodgers is on the inbound here with the Colts.
Bloomington North joining the Mid-State Conference, I think.
You know what? In Bloomington South, where are they going to go?
I don't know.
Are they going to stay in, what is that, Conference Indiana?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Why did they not both go?
No idea.
Bloomington South going to go to Hoosier Hills with Bedford North Lawrence and Floyd Central and
Jeffersonville. Tell you.
What's the best conference in the state, John?
What the hell is the one where
the MIC?
Is it the
it is
MIC
the
or
MIC,
the Crossroads?
right?
What's the Crossroads? It's got Hamilton Southeastern and Brownsburg and all that.
What's the one that used to have
Metropolitan? No, that's the MIC.
What's the one that had in the glory days, if you will, but
the SWIAC with Eastern and Bloomfield and Linton and Shakamak?
It's exactly right. No, that had Muncie Central and Newcastle.
North Central
and,
Conference.
What's that?
North Central
Yeah,
Conference.
I mean, that conference was loaded.
Yeah,
man.
Anderson, Muncie
Just
Central,
ridiculous.
Newcastle, Richmond.
Back in the day, it was just incredible.
Logansport.
Kokomo might have been in there.
Man, you had some long travel time there, too.
Totally.
That's the other thing, too. Can
Totally.
you imagine going, we got a game tonight. We got a Thursday. Of course, you didn't play on Thursday night. The fellas didn't back then, but Thursday night in Richmond, we got
I
to
used
go
to
from
love-
Logansport to Richmond.
But when I was at North Central, I loved the games. We played New Albany. We played Terre Haute South. We played New Albany. We played Terre Haute South once, and true story, it was in the wintertime. Adam Alexander and I were sitting in my car letting it warm up. The bus arrives to take us to Terre Haute South. We get in the, go, do the game, come back. My car was still running. I forgot to turn the car off. My car idled for like 8 hours.
My favorite,
quarter tank of gas, if anybody's wondering.
My favorite was Shoals. Going to Shoals from Eastern, you get to go Highway 50 between Bedford and Shoals, which is wine. It's like a roller coaster. And then by the time we get there, like 3 guys would have puked.
Yeah, I was going to say. Little
Hey,
motion
we're going to
sickness.
get there where everybody's puking, and you get there and play Shoals. So, yeah, the Shoals Jug Rocks. Have you ever seen the Jug Rock down there?
No.
It's a big rock balanced on another rock. It's
Really?
incredible. So, about as southern Indiana as you can get right there.
That's beautiful.
Let's go see the 2 rocks balanced on one another.
Well, John's up next, and I promise you it will not be a thank you, ma'am ride. There will be no puking going on between now and 6, but J&B's with you. We'll be back with you tomorrow at noon. Thanks to Tom Crean again for his time, Tony East as well, and Joel A. Erickson. Thanks for listening to Aquarian Company.